enjoy Moldovan folk music while we get situated. Hey, how you guys doing? All right, so what are we doing here today? We're going into Moldova in part because I honestly consider it to be a little bit of like a comedic interlude. Moldova on a map, just so you guys can situate yourself in the sounds, the music. Let's see, what does Moldovan food look like? Okay, this is the food. Let me just situate us on a map here, because it's right in between Romania and Ukraine. You guys see this? Kaboom. I like this one because the little dagger in the heart of it. So, Moldova, if you guys remember, we've done a lot on Ukraine. We've done a lot on Romania. Romania is George Soros' origin point in terms of, like, George Soros took the first civilian flight to Romania after the Cold War. He set up the first NGO there. Romania canceled the elections when the pro-Trump candidate, Caitlin Georgescu, won the first round. Tons of NATO fuckery. The largest military base in all of Europe is being built basically against the Romanian people's will right on the Black Sea, right here, where it points out at Crimea. So Romania is the big linchpin to winning the war against Russia in Ukraine. And sandwiched in between Ukraine and Romania is Moldova. And we've talked a lot about how Romania serves as the main weapons transshipment point. There are all these kind of like Romanian gangs and weapon smugglers, and the CIA sends, and the DOD and the British Ministry of Defense send all these weapons through Romania into Ukraine, and right smack in the middle of them is little old Moldova. So Moldova has been a fun. There's like a Zelensky comedy clip. Is it Moldova? Here, hold on a second. Let me play this. We're going to do a quick history. Let me tell you what we're going to do in the next 2 hours here. Okay, the main star of the show is I want to go over this new 15-minute. I want to annotate this new 15-minute tell-all by Samantha Power, the head of USAID, to these Russian pranksters. I don't know how these guys do it. I mean, it's almost making me believe the bullshit that Bellingcat did around Navalny's Novichok nutsack when they prank called Russian intelligence. Because the Russian prank callers are really fucking good. Like, they get everybody. I don't know how they do it. But they got Carl Gershman, the head of the National Endowment for Democracy, to confess everything that Ned did to organize the color revolution attempt in the summer of 2020 in Belarus. That's actually kind of a funny. Let me pull that up real quick, because that's just like a funny accompaniment. Yeah, here you go. In a call with Russian pranksters. They're very pranky. A lot of hanky-panky coming from the pranky. I think this is the Moldova clip. Okay, I just want to play this real quick. This is back when Zelensky, because, it's like straight out of Team America World Police, where, like the president dictator, the guy who canceled elections and has been an illegitimate president of our chief vassal state in the East. He's been an illegitimate president for a year and a half now. May 2024 was when he was supposed to have an election so that you could have a democratic vote about who the head of state is, as ratified by the people, so that you know that the government is legitimate. But no, they have, just like in Team America World Police, where, what is it, the Film Actors Guild, the actors control the world. This is Zelensky. I think this clip mentions Moldova. Let's see. This was about EU accession. Because as we're going to see, Moldova is a very funny country. It's got a really interesting history. I got a bunch of history clips pulled up before we get to the main event. So you'll really feel like you get to know the sights and sounds of Moldova. I wonder what the women look like. Moldovan. My search results are already fucked because I had to type in Lahore, Vagistan when I was looking up the, let's see, Moldovan women. Okay. Oh, they're in the military. They've been NATO-fied. Okay. All right. Look, you just got to get to know the culture. This is purely cultural anthropology. That's the only reason that we're doing this. All right. So, look, we'll be egalitarian. I know we got a lot of beautiful women in the audience. Let's see what Moldovan men look like. All right. Some material to work with. Artists at Bohemian. Look at the jawline. See, we love everyone here. Okay. All right. So, let me just play this real quick. This is back when Zelensky was an actor. Broken Human says, wonder if Mike brought Korean barbecue. I've had Korean barbecue at 3:30 a.m., 4:30 a.m., and 5:30 a.m. every night in Koreatown during my New York trip. I love it. I'm an addict. I have been kicked out of the American military because of its interference with my weight loss goals. But let's go.
Hello?
Good morning, Mr. Koloborochka. Can I connect you with Angela Merkel?
Yes, you can connect.
Hello. My congratulations. We decided to take your country to the European Union.
Oh, fuck! Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, wow! Oh, I'm so happy. Yes. Thank you very much. All the Ukrainians and all of our country. We've been waiting for this so much time.
Ukrainian?
Yes, Ukrainians.
Oh, I'm so sorry. That's a mistake. I was calling to Montenegro.
Montenegro. I see. Okay. Yeah, my congratulations. Yes, to Montenegro.
Okay, so sorry, that was actually Montenegro, not Moldova. Moldova is in the middle of another EU fight. So here's basically, okay, let me play a couple history videos, and then I'll do my commentary. All right, so I've got a couple pulled up. We're going to start with this really good, and I know that the sound levels are not really well EQ'd, but all right, so we're going to do a little bit of history here. We're going to do it in the order that I watch these. So we're going to start with the Center for Eastern Studies, which is, I don't know who they're funded by, but I have to imagine they get money directly from the EU, the U.S. State Department, USAID, the UK Foreign Office. We can look this. Someone could look this up maybe in the meantime. Let's see, Center for Eastern Studies, because this is like a Warsaw-based policy think tank. Okay, so this is gonna be Ann Applebaum, Poland. Boom, 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 boom. Founded in 1990, right at the end of the Cold War. Fully financed by the Polish state budget. It's the largest of the EU's think tanks. Okay, so it's like... oh, man. All right. Employs over 50 research fellows. They specialize in Russian studies, Ukraine, Belarus, Moldova, Germany, blah, 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 blah. Okay. So, I'm just going to play a couple things from this. We're just going to get it. So, this is from May 2023. So, 1 year into the war, the Russia-Ukraine kinetic conflict. And I have a couple timestamps pulled up, but let me just play a couple seconds to get situated. So, this is like a very hardcore, like, EU NATO bot. And Moldova is background. Moldova was kind of like attached to Romania, but it was also pried apart by Russia. There are these two zones, like this Transnistria zone and this Gagauzia zone, that are like highly pro-Russian. It's basically torn between East and West. And after the 2014 Victoria Nuland coup in Ukraine, we made a very special focus on absorbing Moldova into the EU and NATO Borg. It had been a kind of independent buffer zone up until about that time, and constant source of tension starting in the early 90s between NATO and Russia. But we got a lot more aggressive about folding it in after the 2014 Ukraine coup. So the status of it now is not a member of NATO, but it has applied for EU membership. So it's on its way.
Joining or forming a union with Romania.
Okay, so let me get to about I'll start like right here. So this is about a year into the war. This is about 2 years ago. These two NATO bots talking about the status of Moldova.
Threats from Russia coming to Moldova, towards Moldovan politicians. Russia is very much involved into Moldovan politics when it comes to different hybrids, actions and activities.
Hybrid actions. And this is the hybrid warfare doctrine. Remember the former Gerasimov doctrine that they lied about and then said, oops, I'm sorry for creating the Gerasimov doctrine. Look at that, it just auto-populates. And then they switched to hybrid warfare and said that just means like they're influencing media. Hence the NATO tanks to tweets. We need to control the media. We need to control social media.
Russia is supporting certain political parties and political organizations in Moldova, which are doing everything they can to change the power or to change the government in Moldova, to change.
Because there's a pro-EU government that's in power right now. And they just won this election last week under very shady circumstances. And so the NATO bots are saying Russia is interfering. And remember, this is how they canceled elections in Romania. It's because they said Russians created TikTok accounts, therefore the entire electorate vote is canceled. Meanwhile, NATO is openly funding TikTok influencers. NATO summit. TikTok Instagram influencers help aging NATO connect with Gen Z. Bringing 16 TikTokers. NATO is embracing online NATO's newest weapon. It's from the Washington Post. Hold on a sec. We gotta circumvent the firewall here. Paywall. NATO's newest weapon is its online content creators. Social media influencers getting inside access to the NATO summit to boost their... So they don't cancel elections for NATO TikTokers. 27 TikTok creators were brought by the Department of Defense. Of course, it's now the War Department. Possibly thanks to your boy, who told the Trump administration to told the Trump campaign to rename the Defense Department to the Department of War about a year ago. I don't know. Look, all I'm saying is, I think that seed started with me, but this is from a year ago, so they're still calling it the Defense Department. So 27 TikTokers were brought to the fucking Pentagon, the State Department, and NATO. Do you think they would cancel elections in Romania if a TikTok campaign for the pro-EU, pro-NATO candidate? No. Fuck no. They will cancel elections if anybody else has influence other than them. And that is a little bit-ish what happened in Moldova, because they banned political parties. They, scrapped votes from parts of the country that were, seemed to be pro-Russian. Okay, but let's get back to this right here.
To make this geopolitical shift, to stop the European integration of this country. So Moldova realized...
Stop the European integration, right? Integration just means absorption. You know, what I did with my Korean barbecue last night, I integrated it into my small and large intestines. The process of EU integration is the elimination of your national sovereignty. You have to turn everything over to an independent governing board, an independent NGO body who will determine what books you can read in your schools, what law schools can be credentialed, how people move up in the judiciary, all of your institutions get determined from the outside as part of that process. And so obviously, since that is connected to the commerce side, that means that you can have no economic trade effectively with Russia. So if Russia is offering cheap things that your country wants, like natural gas, that means you are shit out of luck, and the money will all go to Shell, British Petroleum, Chevron, and Exxon instead of Gazprom. And the people will get poor, the industry will be crushed, but NATO economic stakeholders will make shitloads of money. That's the play.
That it would be actually more wise and quite safe already to realign, to redirect, to get closer with the Western partners without entering NATO, without going all the way into the integration into the military sphere, let's say. But
so what he's saying is, right now the plan is to fold Moldova into the EU, but not go full NATO, because Moldova is in very tenuous territory, and also Transnistria, the eastern part of Moldova, is like fully controlled by Russia and has been since the 90s. And we'll get to that part of the picture as we get deeper into this.
Well, cooperate with the Western partners.
Okay, so without joining
Cooperate with the Western partners.
NATO, so not going quite that far. However, they are en route to joining the European Union now.
Yes.
Is this popular in the country?
Okay, so this again, in 2023, they had just applied for EU membership. And the question is this popular in the country? One might wonder, why would you need to ask that question? Why would a country do a thing that the people don't want to do? And here's the answer.
It's quite...
Do the people actually want to do what their government is forcing them to do?
Popular still, around, depends on different opinion polls, but around 50 to 60% of the general population support the integration with the European Union. The problem is that a lot of opinion polls shows that if you will allow Moldova to join few different organizations at the same time, a lot of people would vote for it. So they would.
Let me keep playing this.
They would like to be both in the European Union and, for example, in the Eurasian Union with Russia at the same time.
The people, I guess, are okay with joining the EU. The problem is, if you let them vote to join an economic pact with Russia, they'll vote for that. So we have to not let them vote to join any other economic pact. We're the lowest GDP country in Europe. So we need to only limit them for their economic lifeline with the EU. Because the problem is, if you put it up to a vote, the people will want to join the Eurasian Union with Russia. This is democracy manifest.
But in generally speaking, better part of the general public is supporting integration with the European Union. With NATO, no, and it's not only because of the neutrality status, which, as I said before, is enshrined in the Constitution, and therefore, cannot be changed that easily.
So they have a neutrality status in their Constitution.
Would have to be voted on the referendum and so on. It's really impossible right now. But integration with NATO is still perceived by the large part of the Moldovan population as unnecessary trigger, which could push Russia towards some more aggressive actions toward Moldova, whatever it could be in the current situation.
You mentioned that maybe they would like to join the European Union, maybe the Eurasian Union as well. Could you tell us something about the pro-Russian protests that were spoken about regarding Moldova? How much that is Russian propaganda and how much it's true?
Well, there are protests against the pro-Western government in Moldova. They are taking place since September 2022, quite regularly. They are organized by the so-called Shore Party, which...
So these are protests against the in-power, pro-EU, NATO-bot government, and they're being backed by this guy, Ilan Shore. And you're going to hear the background. He's a recurring character. He's kind of the Soros bête noire in Moldova. And he's a recurring character in the events of both this week and the past several years. I'm just going to let it play.
It was created by Ilan Shor, and this is why it bears his name. Ilan Shor, who is, let's put it mildly, very controversial politician and businessman. He was already in 2015 sentenced for more than 7 years in prison for being involved in the embezzlement of $1 billion from the Moldovan banking system in 2014.
The crime.
Okay, so this is NATO's enemy in Moldova, Soros's enemy in Moldova, who's got his own schemes. He's leading this populist force that wants neutrality with Russia. So this guy Ilan Shor he was arrested in 2015 in Moldova. Again, in 2014, in tandem with the State Department UK Foreign Office coup in Ukraine to oust Yanukovych, when we lit the parliament on fire on January 6th, the democratically elected Ukrainian government out of office, we made a move on Moldova. And so Ilan Shor wrote, he kind of like went against that and backed all these aggressively neutral parties, just like in Pakistan with Imran Khan, when the State Department cooed him out for being aggressively neutral.
In the meeting, according to the document, the State Department official spoke in forthright terms about Washington's displeasure with Pakistan's stance and neutrality in the conflict. The document quotes Lewis saying, "People here are quite concerned about why Pakistan is taking such an aggressively neutral position on Ukraine." I want you to let that wash over you, shower in it, rub-a-dub-dub, give a scrub in the tub. For this new term in your lexicon, this is all the State Department needs to orchestrate a coup to run you out of office and throw you in prison for the rest of your waking life. For the crime of what? Genocide? Holocausting? Burning people alive? No. For taking an aggressively neutral position.
So they went up against him. They said they hit him with corruption charges, which makes you wonder. I haven't actually looked into this yet, but if I were to just go to like USAID, rule of law, Moldova, I bet you that like who went against Shor? I bet you it was these rule of law. There you go. This is the Millennial Challenge Corporation. This is the USAID program, the USAID Model Court Project, and the U.S. Embassy in Moldova. It's so predictable. You just know anytime the State Department's political enemies are getting arrested, you just know there's a USAID rule of law program to have the prosecutors go after that person. The USAID Model Court Program. Model puppet judges. Model puppet prosecutors. This is from 2021. This is right before the war broke out. The U.S. Embassy in Moldova hopes this project will have a significant impact on the judiciary in Moldova. So while they're arresting the State Department's enemies in Moldova, the U.S. State Department is putting significant impact on the judges and prosecutors in Moldova. So here is the Model Court Project, our partnership with Moldovan courts. Jesus Christ, man! To create judicial centers of excellence. I mean, imagine if the Russians did this. Imagine if, like, the Russian embassy had a direct partnership with the courts. The independent judicial system is directly fucking partnered with the government embassy. We'll do court performance monitoring. Yeah, we're going to judge the judges by how well... we're going to monitor the judges for how well they arrest our political enemies. We're doing strategic planning, judicial leadership. So this is like training them so that you move up into the Moldovan Supreme Court only if you're blessed by the U.S. Embassy in Moldova. A grants program. They're directly fucking funding them with grants. Imagine if the Russians were just funding judges and prosecutors. They would cancel the election on that very basis. decentralization, anti-corruption. Wow, that's so crazy. The State Department's political enemies get arrested on corruption charges while USAID is running an anti-corruption program through the Moldovan Ministry of Justice. That's crazy. The USAID and US government strategy is EU integration, and the guy who's running against EU integration gets arrested for corruption. Wow. Who could have thought? This is this ROLI, this rule of law institutional strengthening program in Moldova. Is building up the Superior Council of Magistracy. This is the same thing they did in Romania, if you remember. How they were working directly with the Romanian court who canceled the Romanian election when the wrong guy won. They're working directly with the friggin' magistrates and the Department of Judicial Administration. Your independent judiciary, sir. You want to check out the integrated country strategy? This is always I like doing this. The Brazil one was super helpful because the State Department publishes like a unclassified country strategy for every country. So this was May 2022. This is Biden administration. This is like just after the outbreak of the Russia-Ukraine war. Let's see what the State Department publicly says its strategy is in Moldova. Shall we? The Moldovan government is working to advance an ambitious democratic reform agenda, simultaneously managing the threats of Russia's military presence on Moldovan territory, near total dependence on Russia for energy, deep-seated corruption, nostalgia for Soviet times among segments of the population fueled by Russian misinformation. This is the chief of mission priorities, is to eliminate nostalgia for Soviet times. Now this is because, effectively, when we began folding Moldova into the NATO-bot sphere after the Cold War in 1990, the economic reforms did not actually benefit substantially the Moldovan people. They're unhappy with it the same way the Russians were unhappy with delegating their entire economic model to George Soros and Harvard in the 1990s. But look at this. It's literally part of the State Department public integrated country strategy to eliminate nostalgia for Soviet times among segments of the Moldovan population fueled by Russian misinformation. Okay, so now you're going to see, as we're going to get to, why there were tens of millions of dollars of USAID grants to censor the internet and censor the news and control the entire news ecosystem in Moldova. Because we're going to see, like, they believe that if they can just eliminate the Russian language, Russian affinity on Moldovan TV, Moldovan radio, Moldovan social media, Moldovan telegram channels, then they can eliminate all resistance to completely folding Moldova into the EU NATO-bot board. Despite these challenges, we still successfully control the government. Blah, 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 blah. We have a strong interest in Moldova realizing their vision to become part of our digestive system. Okay, so rule of law is number 1. Arrest all our political enemies. What's priority number 2? Promote deeper and diverse trade, investment, and energy cooperation to build back better from the pandemic. They're also using them for the refugee ploy. Okay, we want to use them as a military base of operations, which makes a lot of sense, again, when you simply look at Moldova on a map, as we've talked about. They want to keep the weapons flowing. To accomplish these policy priorities, we will work closely with Moldovan government leaders and institutions, as well as with Moldova's growing cadre of civil society, media, and business leaders. God, that looks a lot like foreign interference, doesn't it? If the Russians just said this, that we would never allow an election in Moldova again. This is like the kind of thing you would typically need to, hack an intelligence agency to get them to confess. Strengthen economic institutions, create a more attractive business climate. Okay, this is so that, Soros can just buy up all the assets. All right, I don't want to get too deep into this because I want to keep going into our story because we have to get to the main event. Let's keep going.
Of the century.
The so-called thefts of the century, yes, a very, very popular thing. I mean, one of the things which made Moldova popular in the world, unfortunately. So there are wines, and there is also theft of the century.
Pluses and minuses.
Yeah, yes, exactly. So he is perceived as a person who was one of the most important people behind this whole process.
So they're still talking about, again, the NATO enemy in Moldova, this Elon Shore character.
And recently, actually...
So saying that he was arrested essentially by the USAID courts in Moldova, sentenced to 7 years in prison, but as you'll see, he fled the country.
He was sentenced by the appeal court again for twice as much as before for the same thing. So, but the problem is that actually he ran away from the country in 2019, and since 2019 he is in Israel because he is Israeli citizen as well, not only Moldovan. He lives in Herzliya probably, but despite the fact that
okay, so this is one of these funny things that makes, again, little old Moldova, but it's a microcosm of the global macrocosm. So you have these Israeli-Russian relations, okay? Now, I covered this. Let me actually see if I can make this note public because I have trouble getting my ChatGPT working here. But you guys are gonna like this. This is a funny little thing. Give me 1 second here. This is going to take me about 2 minutes to pull up. Let me do a little bit more Moldovan folk music. All right, we got it. As I mentioned, a lot of what's happening right now with internal U.S. domestic politics and then also with the global foreign policy establishment schisms started in 2015 with the Iran deal, but they have also made the kind of soft war between parts of the Israeli foreign policy establishment and the NATO foreign policy establishment are also, those tensions also express themselves in the Russian affair, because there are many economic linkages between Russia and Israel. And this gets back to the Jeffrey Epstein story, interestingly enough. So, so one of the things that I did, because is, you guys may have seen me, I did like a 90-minute thing with Mario Nawfal on, actually we did like 3 hours, but part 2, I just did like 90 minutes on Jeffrey Epstein and Ehud Barak. Ehud Barak was the Israeli military commander in the 1970s who led one of the most elite military intelligence units in the Israeli army. And then from 1982 to 1985, Ehud Barak was the head of Amman, which is Israeli military intelligence. It's about 2 to 3 times bigger than Mossad. It is, so Israel has 3 levels of intelligence. They have Shin Bet, which is their version of the FBI. They have Mossad, which is their version of the CIA. And they've got Amman, which is their version of, kind of like the NSA. But it's much bigger than Mossad. And Ehud Barak was the head of that. And then he became the Minister of Defense, their version of the head of the Pentagon. And then he became the Prime Minister at the same time Bill Clinton was the president. Now, Ehud Barak, in addition to being the apex predator of the anti-Netanyahu side of the Israeli military and intelligence state, because again, Ehud Barak was the head of the Labor Party, which is the left-wing counter to the right-wing Likud Party. The Likud Party is in power right now. In the 1990s, the Labor Party was in power. And Jeffrey Epstein, while he was visiting the Bill Clinton White House 17 times in the 1990s, and then helping Bill Clinton start the Clinton Global Initiative, was also had this very deep relationship with the head of state in Israel, Ehud Barak. And I have questions, given that if you know your history, It all goes back to Iran-Contra. Who was the head of... Okay, so Iran-Contra, the Iran side of that, again, this was the U.S. working with Saudi Arabia and Israel to sell weapons illegally to Iran, to skim those weapons proceeds and send them to Nicaragua. Two wars at once, both of them illegal. The Iran sale was illegal under the international weapons embargo after 1979. The Nicaragua funding was illegal under the Democrat-passed Bolin Amendment. And so the CIA and the National Security Council in the United States struck a deal with Adnan Khashoggi, the number one weapons dealer in the entire world, to use a Israeli back channel to send weapons illegally to Iran to fight off Saddam Hussein in Iraq. And so, who was the head of Israeli military intelligence, again, from 1982 to 1985? Ehud Barak. At the moment Iran-Contra started, it was Ehud Barak who was in charge of it from the Israeli side. Who was handling Adnan Khashoggi's money? Jeffrey Epstein. So 100,000 emails came out about 2 months ago, which had hundreds of emails between Jeffrey Epstein and Ehud Barak. But I think they probably went back to the 1980s. I think this relationship goes back 40 years. Jeffrey Epstein was handling the money for Ehud Barak's main instrument for the entire operation. Are you guys appreciating the implications of what I'm saying right now? It's kind of fucking insane if you think about it. But one of the things that came out in these leaked emails, so 2014, we overthrow the democratically elected government of Ukraine, and then there's the counter coup in the Donbass and Crimea. At that moment, Ambassador Daniel Fried, Obama's sanctions coordinator, leads this international sanctions roadshow to block everybody from doing business with Russia. This is in mid-late 2014. Okay? So, Jeffrey Epstein, while he's working with the former head of Israeli military intelligence, a former prime minister, who's all up in Avril Haines' shit. Ehud Barak was also a part of West Exec. You guys remember West Exec? So West Exec was the government in exile during the first 4 Trump years. West Exec Advisors. This was a consulting company founded when Trump won the election. It was founded by Anthony Blinken, who would go on to be Secretary of State, Michelle Flournoy, who I think was, number 3 at the Pentagon, Avril Haines, who was Deputy Director of the CIA and would go on to be the Director of National Intelligence, David Cohen, who was Deputy Director of the CIA, Jen Psaki, Lisa Monaco, Rick Stengel, who ran the Global Engagement Center, the Censorship Center of the State Department. So they all formed this joint, who's the bad guy in Transformers? Megatron. They formed like Megatron. West Exec was like the all of the what were the name of the bots? Who were the Megatron bots? What are they called? Autobots. And who were they up against? Megatron. Decepticons. Okay? These all the Decepticons got together when Trump won the election and started this big joint consulting company. They started this joint consulting company, which again is just like the Clinton Global Initiative. They're selling influence. Yeah. We just want your advice. No, what they're doing is they're paying them as clients so that when Tony Blinken becomes Secretary of State and Michelle Flournoy becomes number 3 at the Pentagon and David Cohen becomes Deputy Director of the CIA and Jen Psaki becomes the White House mouthpiece and Lisa Monaco becomes the de facto head of the Justice Department and Avril Haines becomes the head of the entire intelligence community, they owe soft favors to their clients at West Exec. Okay, it's a consulting version of it's like a for-profit version of a scam philanthropy nonprofit. It's just a way to pay people for favors. You think if a government, for example, or a group gave $1 million in consulting fees to WestExec, they won't remember that when their Secretary of State, the head of the Justice Department. You think if someone who paid $10 million for consulting fees to WestExec would get in trouble for any crime under a Lisa Monaco Justice Department? So one of the things that WestExec did is they worked with all of their foreign government allies. So because the Biden administration, the Obama administration hated the Netanyahu government, who tried to block the Iran deal and gave them a million headaches. And I'm not like tooting the Netanyahu horn here. It was actually, I don't know if you guys saw this, but Trump truthed this out last night. Did you see this? The Trump truth on the Netanyahu protests? Trump Truth Social. This is pretty crazy. Last night, because there were these USAID, not USAID. Last night, yeah, here you go. These are the protests in Israel, and Trump truthed out the anti-Netanyahu protests in Israel. These were the protesters, anti-Netanyahu protests, Israel, now or never. Basically, because, there's this whole hostage deal, yada yada. Yeah. Trump shares photo of crowd. They wanted Netanyahu to agree to Trump's peace deal, and Netanyahu deleted his tweet endorsing it. There's a lot of crazy stuff happening there. But what's really funny is the Biden administration was funding protests through USAID. The USAID was backing the Israeli opposition against Netanyahu during the Biden term. And Trump has just had this very complicated relationship with Netanyahu, where they were like best buddies in term one. And then I think Trump felt super snubbed by Netanyahu when Netanyahu was like the first to congratulate Biden, while the court was still, while we still had all these court challenges to the election in playing out in the U.S. judicial system. And then, there's been this love-hate thing in term two, where sometimes they've been friends. I think Trump probably felt dicked over the Iran bombing and some of the statements and intransigence, and then Trump has gotten closer with Qatar and a bunch of the Arab allies, and so things are kind of coming to a head right now. But what's really funny, I was out with friends last night, and I was just making a joke, which was like, because Trump really wants the stuff in Gaza to end right now, or does he? I don't even really know, because there's this Gaza-Lago plan. They want to build Mar-a-Lago on the Gaza Riviera, and there's the whole Tony Blair, Larry Ellison plan in Gaza. But I think that's only possible if there's peace, and then there's some sort of financial compensation. And I think the Likud party folks don't want to go along with that, or they want it their way. So what's really funny is like there are these almost like USAID style protests to back the American foreign policy inside of Israel. So you see like the USAID style protests were like have Trump, Netanyahu, and Putin arrested. These were anyway. But let's get back to our story here. So Ehud Barak was working with WestExec. And the reason I bring this up, though, is because I want to get into a little bit of this, like what's happening in Moldova is, if you zoom out, just a microfied version of what's happening on the global stage. So one of the things that came out in these emails was that Ehud Barak they were partnered with Pinchas Bucharest, who was the former head of Unit 8200 in Israel. But Epstein, this is the ChatGPT summary, but the emails are all online, sought inroads with Vladimir Putin's inner circle. In April 2015, so while Russia is under international sanctions from the Obama administration, but the Israeli government is pissed at the Obama administration over the Iran deal and still very close with Russia. In April 2015, Jeffrey Epstein used Ehud Barak to connect with Russian officials. He had Ehud Barak meet Sergei Belyakov, Russia's former Deputy Minister of Economic Development. Okay, so we're at our international development in Russia, meeting through Jeffrey Epstein to connect with Israelis. Epstein saw this as a chance to reach Putin's advisors. He explicitly asked Ehud Barak to tell Putin's inner circle that Jeffrey could advise on markets in the financial system in an era of zero interest rates. And then Jeffrey Epstein coached the former head of all of Israeli military intelligence on how to court Vladimir Putin's advisors. And then Jeffrey Epstein offered advice on how to evade U.S. sanctions against Russia. Okay? So this is in 2015. Barack Obama is still president. Netanyahu and Barack Obama are in a huge war over the Iran deal, which had just been signed in March 2015. Okay, so now Israel wants to do business with Russia, but the problem is Russia is under all these Obama sanctions. In addition to the Iran deal, now Obama is fucking up Israel's economic partnerships with Russia. And so who does the Democrat side of the Israeli military intelligence state work with to circumvent U.S. sanctions on Russia? Jeffrey fucking Epstein. Okay, so you have a U.S. State Department embargo on Russia. You have Israeli military intelligence back-channeling with the Russian Ministry of International Development through Jeffrey Epstein to get around international sanctions. Because Epstein's job is getting around taxes, tax evasion, asset sheltering, just like he was doing with Adnan Khashoggi in the 1980s during Iran-Contra. Okay? The leaks show that Epstein was willing to assist sanctioned Russians. And Ron Wyden actually, brought this out, that Jeffrey Epstein was moving hundreds of millions of dollars through sanctioned banks on behalf of Israelis working with the Russians. So you see, every part of this, you see why you can't get deep into the Epstein stuff and why we're, never going to get transparency around the intelligence connections. Because here you have, okay, Putin is partnered with Trump, and so Trump doesn't want to reveal, the links of this, or Trump is partnered with Israel, or the Netanyahu government. But who's actually doing this? You have the Democrat allied side of Israel, Ehud Barak, so the Democrats don't want transparency because Ehud Barak is West exec. That's fucking Tony Blinken and Lisa Monaco and Rick Stengel and Avril Haines. This is the Epstein hot potato, where every party in power uses Epstein as a battering ram for their own negligence to disclose the things while they were in power. So Epstein was financially entangled with these sanctioned Russian entities and leveraging his own network, including Ehud Barak and Israel, to help Russians bypass Western sanctions, showing Epstein operating in a gray zone between finance and diplomacy. But you see the same thing in Moldova. In Moldova, so this is it, Elon Shore, okay? Here's our boy, okay? This is NATO's enemy in Moldova, just like you had NATO's enemy around the Iran deal. And remember, Israel has been totally neutral in this Russia-Ukraine thing, much to the ire of the Biden administration from 2022 to 2024. Israel did not help Ukraine against Russia, in part because of these deep financial entanglements between Russia and Israel. So Israeli-born convicted fraudster on track for a parliament seat in the Moldovan parliament, and then he had to flee because of USAID. USAID courts, jailing him. Okay, here's our cheeky bête noire in this story. All right, so let's get back to this.
He's away, He still is running his party. He's participating in those protests on the screen of the TV, which is usually being, shown to the protesters during a protest.
So he's like Tommy Robinson-ish, right? Where while he was in Cyprus, while like the street protests were going on. So NATO is pissed. So you have, this Israeli affiliated with Russian and like Russian money, who's funding, according to NATO, protests. He's doing like, he's like the Soros on the other side. Just like Soros and Netanyahu are in this eternal war against each other, so is Soros against like the Ilan Shor in Moldova. You have this anti-NATO political force who has been convicted by USAID courts in Moldova. So look, it's like fraud and shystiness all around, right? Like the blob in the U.S. has taken over the Moldovan courts through USAID, and as you'll see from the Samantha Power leaked this video, this 15-minute video, which is our main event, you'll see she even says like a little bit of money goes a long way in Moldova, and that's why our USAID spending is so effective there, because they're so poor, they're so easily bribed. She says that shit.
We surged resources. I can't remember now the numbers, but I mean, the so-called Ukraine supplementals always had tens of millions of dollars also for Moldova.
Tens of millions of dollars to tiny little Moldova. Population 2.6 million. Tens of millions of dollars.
And that, sorry for the banging, and that money went much, much further in Moldova than it did in Ukraine because it's such a small country. But
and that money went much, much further. We bought much, much more influence in Moldova, which is exactly what I always say about the USAID spending. The money goes a long way. You can buy a lot with $100 in Moldova of USAID money. You won't necessarily buy that much influence with $100 in China, for example. So you have you have like this shisty USAID NATO bot Borg in Moldova who wants to control it for energy and military, and then you've got this like shisty kind of like Likud party Russia connection, and they're at war with each other in Moldova the same way they're at war with each other here in Washington D.C. The same way they're at war with each other within the power structure of NATO itself. The same way they're at war with each other within the EU. It's like the tiniest little microcosm of everything that's playing out in the Trump truth right here. Okay, but let's just play a little bit more from this.
Protest. He is probably the most active anti-governmental politician in the country. At the same time, his narrative is not pro-Russian, openly pro-Russian, or even not anti-European openly. No, he is rather perpetuating this strange mixture of pro-Soviet, pro-communist sympathies. We will reestablish kolkhozes, for example, so collective farms. Mm-hmm. We will, we will provide you with free public transport, right? Also, all those populist ideas. And
populist ideas. Notice how he's associating with communism. This is the second Cold War, the undeclared second Cold War. I'm just going to use my trademark. What they said about communism, it's the same players, the same NATO players who fought the war on communism. They're just saying, okay, it's populism now.
At the same time, he is, for example, running a network of Merishore shops, which are the so-called social shops with the subsidized goods, like very basic goods, and with
cheap goods.
All those pro-Soviet, pro-communist sentimental narrative, he is gaining popularity.
Pro-Soviet sentimental narratives. God, where have I read that before? That's almost like sentence 1 of the State Department Integrated Country Strategy. The problem is he is driving up nostalgia for Soviet times among segments of the population. Again, the Russian quality of life, the Russian life expectancy went up like almost 10 years after Putin took power because of how much the NATO control over Russia's economy strangled the life out of Russians during the 1990s when Jeffrey Sachs and the Harvard Institute for International Development and USAID took control over Russia's economy. So you saw the same thing in Moldova.
Among the poorer part of the Moldovan population, of the pensioners and so on and so forth, those who were unlucky when it comes to the process of the transformation, economic transformation of the country.
So he's playing to those who were unlucky in the economic transformation of the country. He's saying when the blob took control over Moldova's economy after 1991, when we won the Cold War, those who were unlucky with the blob-run economic transformation, basically everyone who's shit out of luck because the country's plundered, are now following this Israeli-Russian guy who is, as he said, not openly pro-Russia. He wants to be friends with everyone. I think he even uses that phrase, as you'll see. Just like Imran Khan, who was cooed out of office in Pakistan. Aggressively neutral position.
At the same time, he's saying that we as a small country need to be friends with everybody. We need to
friends with everybody. So almost like they want partnerships with the EU, but they also want partners with the Eurasian Pact. Wow, that's crazy. It sounds like exactly what he just said the people of the country want. Sorry, this is background noise from the AC. Let me turn this off. Also, I'm not fat, by the way. I'm really not. All right? Everyone's calling me fat. I weighed myself today at the gym here in the hotel. I lost like 10 pounds this month. Korean barbecue. Breakfast of champions. Actually, late night dinner of champions. Okay, so what he's saying is friends with everyone. That's what NATO's enemy is. That's more like 7 pounds this month. That's okay. So let me
cooperate with everybody. We need to be close with the European Union. Of course, we are not an enemy. We want to cooperate with our Western partners. At the same time, we cannot afford to be enemies of Russia. Really, we need to cooperate with Russia. We need cheap gas from Russia. We need Russia to keep its labor market open for our labor migrants and so on and so forth. Let's be friends together. There's this Russian saying, "Давайте будем дружиться," which means let's be friends. Let's be friends. And
that's the problem. The enemy is someone who just wants to be friends with everyone. Where have I heard that? Where aggressively neutral position. Imran Khan, who is currently rotting in a jail cell despite being the most popular head of state in Pakistan history. He's rotting in a jail cell because the Biden administration ran a coup, bribing with carrots and sticks the parliament in Pakistan to oust him in a no-confidence vote and then arrest him on 200 bullshit charges for hate speech and speech violations. All will be forgiven if you simply impeach and imprison your president. Why? Because he took an aggressively neutral position on Russia and Ukraine. The day before the secret meeting between the Biden State Department and their back channels in the Pakistani ISI and military state and their little honchos in the Pakistani parliament, the day before that, Imran Khan addressed a rally and responded directly to European calls for Pakistan, which again, Pakistan was moving weapons into Romania through Moldova into Ukraine. So you see how it's all connected. Are we your slaves? Khan thundered to the crowd, rejecting the EU call for arms against Russia. What do you think of us? That we are your slaves and that we will do whatever you ask of us? He asked. We are friends of Russia and we are also friends of the United States. We are friends of China and Europe. We are not part of any alliance. And for that, Imran Khan is now rotting away in jail because the State Department used carrots and sticks. They used carrots and sticks against the Pakistani parliament, basically bribing them with USAID money if they could, if they impeached and imprisoned their president, and threatening to make them an international pariah if they didn't, because of the same thing that Elon Shore's party is promoting in Moldova. 20 from BM Jr. Thank you, Mike. I'm just big boned. Try keto, carnivore, intermittent fasting. Look, I joke about it because it's funny. Look, when I was a wrestler back in high school, college, I could cut like 30 pounds in a month. I don't know if I can do it anymore. Back then I still had hair, though. Yeah, aggressively neutral needs to be on merch. That's true. Oh, yeah, I gotta set that merch store. But I think all will be forgiven in Washington if the impeachment against the prime minister succeeds. And it's the same thing here. Any party who wants to be neutral, just like Caitlin Georgescu in Romania, just wanted neutrality. No. The food is not allowed to be neutral. It's either in our belly or our enemies' bellies. And if you don't agree to be eaten by the EU Borg, well, then we'll have to kill you. And we can't have live food walking around where it might be eaten up by, by Russia. All right, so let's turn now. This is a really good, it's hopelessly biased, but this is a really good 11-minute video. I want to speed watch this, and then we'll get to the Samantha Power leaked 15-minute video. Okay. So this is from Professor James Kerr-Lindsay. Now this is like another one of these like NATO bot, professors, but it is a really good. Other than his moments of like abject bias, it is a really good history of Moldova that will be used to set the stage for our Samantha Power leak video. Okay, so let's just get to this.
Could Moldova be about to fall back under Russia's influence?
Okay, so again, you have this Moldovan NATO bot president, and this is from 12 days ago. The elections were just held last week, and they were afraid that because early polls showed a victory for the Elon Shore Israeli-Russian enemies of NATO, they were afraid that Russia was going to win the election before they completely, rigged the shit, as we'll see. Here we go. So this is the question.
On the 28th of September 2025, the country goes to the polls in parliamentary elections that could shape its geopolitical future. One side wants to press ahead with European Union membership, while others look back to Moscow. At the same time, fears are mounting that Russia is actively working to...
By the way, right, it's just like, female... NATO loves running these, like, female... because then all they need to do is just press the feminism button and they automatically get like 20% of the female vote, 40% of the female vote, 60% of the female vote. And so that you have these like, USAID funding for women's programs, and they just like convince women to vote for the NATO-backed female puppetress.
To steer the country back into its orbit. So, why is Moldova so divided, and how is Russia trying to shape this forthcoming election? Hello and welcome. My name is James Kerr-Lindsay, and here I take an informed look at international relations, conflict.
His book is called Secession and State Creation. Oh, you mean kind of like Yugoslavia, what the CIA did in Yugoslavia, where we created all these little secessionist states and then did state creation in Kosovo. Wow. Or like what we're doing in Xinjiang in China, secession and state creation. Or like what we did in Eritrea with Somalia, secession and state creation. Wow, it's so crazy. Where did you come from, James Kerlindsey, PhD? I wonder.
Conflict and security. Although the Soviet Union collapsed more than 3 decades ago, many of its former republics remain split between those seeking a European future and those still tied to Russia. For some, the choice at the end of the Cold War was more than clear. Integration with the European Union and NATO promised democracy, prosperity, and a chance to escape Moscow's dominance.
And again, every time you hear the word integration, just think digestion, okay? When they say integration with the EU, it means digestion by the EU. The EU eats its entire sovereignty. They have no control over their schools, their unions, their laws, their economy, their security posture, their farm, nothing, okay? Integration means digestion.
But for others, the situation was far more complicated. While some of the population and political leaders may have favoured building Euro-Atlantic ties, historical, cultural and economic links to Russia continued, reinforced through language, media and often a dependence on energy.
Did you hear that? Let me rewind. DJ, play that back.
Reinforced through language, media, and often a dependence on energy.
Reinforced, so saying Russian influence is reinforced by language, media, and a dependence on Russian cheap energy. Where does that sound familiar? God, that sounds so familiar. Ukraine Crisis Media Center. So what were the red lines that the USAID, NATO, U.S. State Department, UK Foreign Office funded 70 NGO joint letter? The red lines to Zelensky a month into his term in office? What were the 20 red lines? Anything that allowed, this is the language law after the 2014 coup, banning Russian language. Banning anything pro-Russia in education. And anything that any actions taken by newly elected President Zelensky in 2019, 6 years ago, any implementing of any actions aimed at undermining or discrediting the Orthodox Church of Ukraine or supporting the Russian Orthodox Church in Ukraine, okay? So Zelensky was banned by NATO, the State Department, USAID, the UK Foreign Office, and CIA cutouts like Chemonics, as we went over, who also funds the Ukraine Crisis Media Center, put together these 70 NGOs. Zelensky was banned, media and information policy, from restoring Russian social networks and Russian TV channels in Ukraine. Banned from allowing the Russian language, allowing Russian media, and anything that might support a Russian proxy religion in Ukraine. So what you'll see here is our little NATObot professor. Let me just pull this side by side. And what he's saying is the very things that NATO, USAID, and the State Department banned Zelensky from doing as the democratically elected president of Ukraine is the same main strategic interest in Moldova. $10 from Kali Devi, a love symbol emoji. Thank you, Kali Devi.
Reinforced through language, media, and often a dependence on energy.
And you'll note that's the exact same thing in the integrated country strategy for Moldova. Preventing all nostalgia for Soviet times, the dependence on Russia for energy. So this is how you get Burisma, guys. This is how you get Kofor Black, 30 years at the CIA Distinguished Medal Awards, with Hunter Biden from the Chairman's Advisory Board of the National Endowment for Democracy, building up anti-naphtha gas hubs in Central and Eastern Europe. And why Burisma got USAID funding.
In such cases, the divisions that emerged have shaped politics ever since. One of the best examples is Moldova. For decades, its balance between Russia and the West. But while in recent years it seemed to have leaned decisively towards Europe as the country prepares to vote for a new parliament, deep divisions have once again come to the fore. With several pro-Russian parties vying for power and allegations of Russian interference, Moldova now finds itself at a critical juncture.
Allegations of Russian interference. Russian interference in Moldova. Huh! That's crazy. Let me, now again, our main event is going to be annotating this new Samantha Power 15-minute video confession where she didn't know that she was talking to Russians, and so she just spills the beans on everything they did in Moldova. But even if you go back to like 2023.
And we've actually just launched something called Reporter Shield, which is an insurance fund for journalists doing work that is politically perilous. And journalists will be able to buy in. It's basically a global public good because it's in everybody's interest, as we've discussed, for independent media to...
Independent media, dependent on USAID.
To not only survive, but to thrive.
So this is openly just funding all the media in Moldova, as you'll see.
So Moldova, a place drowning in willful misinformation.
Moldova, a place drowning in willful misinformation. And who the fuck are you to say that? USAID Administrator Samantha Power is just drowning in willful misinformation? Willful misinformation?
In willful misinformation. USA launched something called the Media M Initiative, where we worked with local media outlets to develop a membership system to increase subscription sales and to improve marketing strategies. And
Russian interference. A formal U.S. pay the media. Get them memberships and subscriptions. We're starting a fucking OnlyFans for Moldovan journalists with U.S. taxpayer money. We're helping run their marketing strategy. But Russian interference in Moldova. What was the name of this USAID program? Let's see.
Everybody's interest, as we've discussed, for independent media to not only survive, but to thrive. So Moldova...
Yeah, it is. I mean, it really is like a portrait of Dorian Gray, you know. I bet you she was pretty. It's kind of like Victoria Nuland when you see pictures of her when she was younger, and, you know, she looked like she would have aged very beautifully and gracefully, and then it's like, you know, in Portrait of Dorian Gray, where it's like, you just, you know, as you sell your soul, you get deformed. Well, like, I'm one to talk, right? I've got like a misshapen head. But you know what? Yeah. But I'm like deformed in like a way that I like. I don't know. I feel like something happened to her soul. Like with Victoria Nuland. You know, where it became ghoul-like.
Moldova, a place drowning in willful misinformation. USA launched something called the Media M Initiative.
USAID Media M Program, Moldova. Freedom House, Michael Chertoff. USAID. Look at all these. Oh my gosh. They get the young people. Brain monsters. Brain suckers. Moldova Media Enabling Democracy. Media M Performance Evaluation, November 2023. Kramer Loveless. Internews Moldova. Internews, the CIA Media Control Center. Of course, Internews, which gets $500 million a year from USAID to fund USAID media. $500 million a year. Who also does all these disinformation programs. Abstract. The purpose of evaluating the media enabling democracy and accountability in Moldova is to actively assist USAID in Moldova. they enhance the resilience of Moldova's information space against them being able to think for themselves. Yet challenges like financial sustainability, meaning these media channels would not be able to exist on their own, which is why they need to be subsidized by a foreign government, i.e. us, the United States, and foreign malign influence. Oh my God! No! In this house, in Moldova, where I don't live, another government is funding the media here? That's unbelievable. Oh my God. I'm USAID in Moldova. And would you believe it? There's foreign malign influence in Moldova. Those bastards. Somebody else is funding media here in Moldova, where I don't live, 12,000 miles from Washington, D.C. Can you believe it? Now, of course, our USAID formal fucking program to fund the media in Moldova, that's not foreign malign influence. But somebody else funding a media station or a radio station or a journalist outlet is. The program bolstered the media and society's ability to spot disinformation. Diverse media content emerged, supported by robust advocacy. There's your independent journalism. Media M successfully advanced media literacy. We're back to the media literacy super scam. If you read the wrong media, you are media illiterate. You need to get clockworked oranged to only believe what Samantha Powers and USAID says. More Russian language content is required, particularly in Russian-speaking regions. We need to penetrate the Russian-speaking regions so that they don't vote for someone who's neutral on Russia. And we engage more with regional media to curb misinformation, equipping media organizations to combat disinformation, identifying misinformation. AI, we're going to have weapons of mass deletion here. You're probably going to have like First Draft and like the Atlantic Council Digital Forensics Research Lab and the Corruption Reporting Project. I know this whole network before I even see it. I bet you if I go to Atlantic Council DFR Lab Moldova. There you go. God, is that easy. God, is that easy. Identifying all the accounts they want banned. Going after the Moldovan TV stations. A newly created Moldovan broadcaster claims to be independent. We uncovered a web of connections to Russian state media. Hey, did you uncover the web of connections to U.S. state media? Detective Sherlock? No shit, Sherlock? Did you go to USA.gov and find the shady connections between all of these media organizations and a foreign government? No, literally, they call themselves digital Sherlocks. Watch this. Atlantic Council Digital Sherlocks. Digital Sherlocks. Digital Sherlocks. You see this? It's literally called the Digital Sherlocks Conference. Did the Digital Sherlocks just miss this one? How many of these do they fund? The USAID should consistently back independent media organizations. If they're independent, why are they dependent on your money and direction? And if you remember, we had this incredible stream that I still need to clip on the Corruption Reporting Project, where it showed like USAID, which gave like half of the budget to the Corruption Reporting Project, like like total control over the organization. Like they had to give like a report about what they were going to publish about. They had to work closely with their USAID grant coordinator on it all. They had like topics they weren't allowed to cover. Oh, they also went after academic circles. You can't spell academia without CIA. The Media M program, in combination with other donor programs, are these going to be like Open Society Institute, Omidyar Foundation, Knight Foundation, media literacy programs? USAID should prioritize collaboration with key public institutions such as the Moldovan Ministry of Education. The same way Zelensky was banned from anything that gave Ukraine control over its own Ministry of Education, because after the 2014 coup, it was turned over to a Euro-Atlantic credentialing board. Okay, so USAID takes control over the country's Ministry of Education. Just like our own Department of Education is totally wrapped up with our own teachers' unions, who themselves are totally wrapped up with the CIA, as we covered in the last stream. Like Randy Weingarten and Education International and the AFL-CIO. I am Dane for $5, working link, PBS. All right, let's check this out. Oh, yeah. Before NATO, after NATO. Damn, the smile is gone. Look at that smile. Look at how bright those eyes are. Victoria Nuland. Look how bright that smile is. Look at that. Got the whole world in front of her. Got her whole life in front of her. Then she marries Fred Kagan from the Institute of the Study of War. Didn't the New York Times have this write-up where they talked about democracy? They fell in love over long conversations talking about democracy late into the night. But yeah. Before you find out how the world works, after. Damn. No, but like the light is totally gone from her eyes. Like whatever, everybody ages. I'm not age shaming nobody. But like I don't think this was just like the natural genetic aging. I think this was like a Portrait of Dorian Gray thing. Like damn, the eyes just got dark. You know? Damn. Dane, you fucked me up with this one. It's tough. Tough to see. Okay, hold on a second. Let's get back to this. Our Moldovan little USAID experiment here. Alright, so we have to take control. Imagine if the Russians just completely took over the Moldovan Ministry of Education. Focus on winning over the ethnic minorities. Take over the schools, the local governing bodies. Take over the local governing bodies. Well, they're not really governed locally if they're governed from fucking Langley, Virginia, are they? Moldova is a long way from Langley. Engage prominent journalists and influencers and content creators to catalyze a societal shift. Huh. That's crazy, because you fucking canceled the elections in Romania because of secretly partnered influencers and content creators. This is USAID. This is USAID. And you can't get the grants. They're completely shrouded under this sensitivity shield. So it might as well be funded by the CIA. They say it would put the grantees' lives in danger or discredit them if they were seen to be on the payroll of USAID. This is why they organize riots against all the NGO transparency laws. Watchdogs counteracting misinformation. The scarcity of professional journalists and low pay hinder their activity, as indicated by 90% of online survey respondents. Economic viability is a pressing concern, given the small market and low advertising revenues. That's why they need subsidies by fucking American taxpayers with a median household income of like $50,000. Fuck the low-paying jobs in the United States. People who have low-paying jobs in the United States, their tax money should pay low-paying journalists so that they don't make such low pay in fucking Moldova. Leverage AI. Heavily influenced by misdis and malinformation. Fostering a media sector that's resilient to political and financial pressures. They're not resilient to political and financial pressures. You're putting them under political and financial pressures. Well, they won't have any financial pressures anymore because their whole life is now paid for by USAID. Look at this. By August 2023, 54 national, 20 regional, and 10 local media outlets, along with 26 media monitoring civil society organizations, got funded by the USAID Media Program through grants, sub-grants, consultancies, and other technical assistance. Okay, so that's 54, 74, 84. That's 110 different media organizations in Moldova on USAID payroll. 110 media organizations in Moldova are funded by USAID. And of course, it's a joint USAID project with the CIA's Freedom House and with our UK partners. 110 media organizations in little old fucking Moldova on USAID payroll just through this one program alone. 110 media organizations. Your taxpayer dollars are paying for through one USAID program. And what did our boy say here? The problem was Russian interference in the sanctity of the Moldovan election.
The Republic come to the fore, with several pro-Russian parties vying for power and allegations of Russian interference. Moldova now finds itself at a critical juncture.
And of course, while we're funding 110 media organizations within Ukraine to control the entire national, regional, and local news in all of Moldova, the USAID-funded Atlanta Council DFR lab with 7 CIA directors, 7 number one heads of the CIA on their board, is digging up. Oh my gosh. These broadcasters claim to be independent, but secretly they have a web of connections to Russian media. And I'm sorry, how many times does the word independent appear? Independent. The fucking Internews Moldova Center, Internews, the USAID media program, $500 million a year. It's called the Independent Journalism Center. They claim to be independent, but they're secretly on the payroll of a foreign government. Ah! You mean like the name of our fucking center, huh? Independent, 74 times. Independent media, independent journalism, independent media, independent journalism, independent media, independent. Oh, but you mean they're secretly not independent? Their entire finances are taken care of from the American people by way of our little CIA media funding conduit, USAID. Oh my God. All right, well, we could do our whole thing on this, so let's speed run this.
The Republic of Moldova lies in Eastern Europe, sandwiched between Ukraine to its east and Romania to its west. With a population of around 2.6 million, the country is ethnically diverse. While the majority of Moldovans speak Romanian and many identify closely with neighbouring Romania, which Moldova shares deep cultural and historical ties, there are also significant other minorities. These include Ukrainians, Russians, Bulgarians, and Turks. Crucially, with an annual per capita GDP of $7,600, it's one of the poorest states in Europe. As a result, many Moldovans have emigrated, creating a significant diaspora community. On top of this, Moldova is also home to two regions with special significance for this story. Gagauzia, a Turkic Orthodox Christian autonomous region with strong Russian ties.
So again, it's a Russian Orthodox Church community. What did USAID instruct Zelensky would be a political red line that would create political instability and will coup you out of office if you do anything that supports the Russian Orthodox Church in Ukraine? It's causing them the same problems that it was causing them, in Moldova. This is why the CIA has religions that it likes and religions it doesn't like. Like, it's got a big problem with the Sikhs in India. So you'll see them flagging you'll see the CIA's censorship lab here at the Atlantic Council will go after the Sikhs in India. They'll go after the Russian Orthodox Church, because they identify them as nodes of influence.
And Transnistria, a breakaway territory controlled by Moscow-backed separatists and which still hosts Russian troops. Moldova's story begins in the Middle Ages when the principalities of Moldavia and Wallachia emerged before becoming vassals of the Ottoman Empire in the 16th century. In 1812, the Ottomans handed over the eastern part of Moldavia, an area known as Bessarabia, to the Russian Empire, while the remainder of Moldavia later united with Wallachia to form modern Romania. Bessarabia stayed under Russian control until 1918, when, amidst the turmoil of the Russian Revolution, it also joined Romania. The problem was that the newly created Soviet Union never accepted this decision. In 1940, at the start of the Second World War, the Soviet Union seized the region, creating the Moldavian Soviet Socialist Republic, a top-level republic of the USSR. Over the next 50 years, Moscow consolidated its control. Although Romania also fell under communist rule and became a close Soviet ally, the Kremlin discouraged any sense of shared Romanian identity. Instead, a distinct Moldovan identity was constructed, as well as insisting that Moldovan and Romanian were entirely separate languages. The Cyrillic script was also reintroduced. At the same time, settlers were brought in from Russia and neighbouring Ukraine to change the population. All this would last.
So you see why there's this migration issue, right? So what he's saying here, let me just play that back.
At the same time, settlers were brought in from Russia and neighbouring Ukraine to change the population.
So they're complaining about too much open borders in Moldova because Russians moved in, and that made little Moldova tilt more towards pro-Russian candidates. So we have to close the eastern border to Moldova. Suddenly they're nationalist about the borders, NATO is. The same way they said that we need to stop Chinese immigration into Xinjiang because it's diluting the ethnic Uyghur majority in the Uyghur Autonomous Zone. So they're closed borders about Xinjiang. They're closed borders about Moldova. But open the borders here. Open the borders in Ireland. Open the borders in Hungary. See how they don't give a flying fuck about open borders and immigration? Immigration is a big fucking problem. Remember, what is in the first line of the U.S. State Department Moldova Integrated Country Strategy under Joe Biden? They want to stop out-migration. They want to keep the ethnic blocks. They want to stop in-migration from Russia and stop out-migration of the ethnic Romanians. It's sick.
All this would last until the Soviet Union collapsed in 1991 and Moldova declared independence. But despite this, Russia quickly acted to preserve its influence. In 1992, separatists in Transnistria, backed by Russian forces, broke away, creating a frozen conflict that endures to this day This has limited Moldova's room to manoeuvre as it needs Moscow's support for an eventual solution. Meanwhile, Russia steadily built up its control over Gagauzia, whose autonomy was recognised by the Moldovan government in the mid-1990s. But even beyond these regions, Moscow retained a powerful influence. Older generations and Russian-speaking communities remained loyal to Russia. At the same time, Russian television remained popular, while the promise of cheap gas and jobs in Russia also strengthened the...
So you see this again. He's once again saying the problem is there are all of these very old links with Russia that give people an affinity, and Russian TV stations keeps their propaganda going. So the hearts and minds. So you see again why NATO, the military, moved into the media space.
At the same time, Russian television remained popular, while the promise of cheap gas and jobs in Russia also strengthened the Kremlin.
So the problem is Russian media, Russian TV stations, he says. Let me play it one more time.
At the same time, Russian television remained
popular. And what was in the NATO USAID Red Lines memo to Zelensky, his first month in office? It would be a red line. You are banned, President Zelensky, from restoring Russian TV stations. Word for word. What our little professor on destabilization says as the breakdown for the geopolitics is exactly what's reflected in the fucking Comonix, USAID, State Department, UK Foreign Office, NATO-funded 70 NGO letter of the red lines not to be crossed. You will not allow independent media if it says anything nice about Russia. We present a list of red lines not to be crossed. Should the president cross these red lines, such actions will lead to political instability. We will take to the streets and riot. You cannot do anything to delay digestion by the EU and NATO. You cannot allow anything in the energy space that we don't say, including the IMF privatization, the privatization policies of the IMF of Ukraine's gas sector. And you cannot allow foreign interference, right? Literally, the U.S. government funding this. Literally, USAID, U.S. State Department, NATO itself is on the list of funders for this. It literally just says NATO. I'm sure it's the NATO Political Affairs or Political Action Council. You can only have NATO media, or else we'll coup you out of office. But the problem is, even though we're funding 110 media organizations, the problem is they still have access to Russian TV. So what's the answer? Disinformation programs, media literacy programs, so that they're not available on TV, because that would make you media illiterate. What year is this? This is 12 days ago, this video.
While the promise of cheap gas and jobs in Russia also strengthened the Kremlin's hold over the country. Meanwhile, with little prospect of joining the European Union, the 2000s saw pro-Russian parties dominate the country's politics. But even when pro-European coalitions did emerge, they were often plagued by allegations of corruption and fragile alliances, further cementing Russia's...
I mean, really think about that. 110 in little Moldova. 110 through this USAID, one USAID program alone. This one USAID program started in, 2021 or 2022? This one program, can you name 110 friends? Gun to your head, name 110 people you know. And this is 110 entire media organizations. Name 110 media organizations in the United States. Name 110. And that's in the United fucking States. Population like 350 million now. In little Moldova, what's the population of Moldova? You put it here, right in the beginning. Population of Moldova. 2.6 million. 2.6 million. What's the population of New York City? It's 9 million. New York City has a population of 9 million. Okay, that's like 4 times bigger than all of Moldova. Can you name 110 media stations in New York City? Are there 110 between all the New York Post, New York Times, the Village Voice for gay people, bunch of local radio stations? This is a complete Truman Show. 110 media organizations all on USAID payroll, getting paid buka bucks just to control this little zone.
In the end, the decisive moment of change appeared to come in February 2022 when Russia launched a full-scale invasion of neighbouring Ukraine. This transformed Moldova's political landscape. Suddenly, the dangers of being dependent on Moscow became very clear. As energy supplies were cut, disinformation spiked, and
disinformation spiked. Not this disinformation. Not 110 media organizations all spouting USAID disinformation. The Russian disinformation spiked.
Cyber attacks rose. Indeed, there were even fears that if Ukraine fell, Russian forces would march in to seize Moldova. In response, the country accelerated its shift towards Europe.
The country just unilaterally did that, right? No pressure from the Biden administration. No pressure from their little puppet princess president.
Weeks after the invasion, the pro-European Party of Action and Solidarity, PAS, aligned with the country's president.
Party of Action and Solidarity. Like the Solidarity Movement that was funded to the tune of $72 million by the CIA. In Poland, which funds the Center for Eastern Studies, the first video that we watched.
Maya Sandu applied for EU membership, keen to cement the links. By June 2022, Moldova had been granted EU candidate status. But while the government has pushed ahead with reforms to meet EU standards, including by tackling the country's deep-seated problems with corruption and strengthening institutions.
That's how you meet the process for digestion. It's like cooking something before you eat it. You know how I say EU integration, every time you hear the word integration, switch with digestion? It's like, before we digest you, we want you to be fully cooked. And so this process of strengthening institutions to get ready for EU accession, EU digestion, we have to strengthen your institutions, which means we need to take them over, which means you can no longer have an independent Ministry of Education. As we showed, for example, education in the USAID program. USAID should prioritize collaboration with Moldova's Ministry of Education. Education. USAID has to take control of all 3 levels of education in Moldova. USAID has to control primary, middle, and high school education in fucking Moldova! In Moldova! USAID has to control, according to, again, this is the formal USAID media control program, funding 110 media organizations and media outlets in little old Moldova, population 2.6 million. And in addition to controlling all of the media at the national, regional, and local level, they have to also control all of the media in primary, middle school, and high schools for Moldovans. Full spectrum information dominance, combined with making it illegal to operate foreign influence in Moldova from other countries. Yeah, but that's the thing. So when he's saying, so for the past 3 years, Moldova has been going through these democratic reforms, which is causing resentment by local Moldovans who don't like having to read like transgender propaganda in their primary schools. Let me play that back.
But while the government has pushed ahead with reforms to meet EU standards...
Reforms to meet EU standards. Again, cooking before the digestion.
Including by tackling the country's deep-seated problems with corruption.
Which means arresting anyone who questions the government doing this. That's what tackling corruption means. It means anyone who's got a problem with us cooking ourselves before we get digested by the EU, well, we're going to find a reason to arrest you on corruption charges.
And strengthening institutions.
That means getting rid of sovereignty over your institutions. That means giving Brussels and NATO power over your institutions.
Many are unconvinced. Aside from the linguistic and cultural ties to Russia, large parts of the population remain sceptical about the EU path, arguing that it's done little to lift poverty or improve the economic situation.
Are they right?
Meanwhile...
Or is that misinformation? Is that just Russian misinformation?
Faced with the growing loss of influence, Russia has pushed back strongly.
The hybrid warfare doctrine. Back to the Gerasimov doctrine. Lies, bribes, and interference. USAID's hybrid war... Oh, I'm sorry, Kremlin. Oh, wow. So this isn't bribes. Tens of millions of dollars funding their media. That's not bribe to the media. To alleviate them of the financial burden of having to raise their own money.
Launching what many see as a hybrid war against Moldova, there are growing claims that Moscow has sought to destabilise the country politically, economically and socially.
Oh, threaten to destabilise the country? Oh, you mean like telling their elected president that if he crosses any of the red lines in a list given by the Russians, that they will destabilize the country, they will induce political stability? Oh, wait, I'm sorry. No, that was the USAID State Department NATO memo to Zelensky. Oh, it's almost like everything we accuse them of doing, we do 1,000 times X.
In an effort to derail its European path. And all this has seen President Sandu frame the choice starkly. Moldova must choose between Europe and Russia. And it's...
Why? Listen to the Israeli-Russian guy. Why can't you be friends with both? Why? Oh, because the plan here is Eurasia. Because Moldova is a stepping stone. So we need to completely bankrupt Russia, even if they have cheaper gas, even if they have cheaper products, even if they have cheaper natural resources and rare earth metals. It would allow us to have a higher standard of living by doing trade and commerce with them. You cannot have any other choice but my belly. You have to cook yourself to be digested in my belly, and my belly only.
It's against this backdrop that Moldovans now head to the polls. The elections always promised to be deeply polarised. While the ruling PAS is campaigning on its reform record and European orientation, its primary challenger is the newly created patriotic electoral bloc, the BEP.
Terry Goon for $10. So sad this works so well. Well, imagine being a Moldovan citizen with the lowest GDP in Europe. You don't have the money or the means to compete against this. And if you try to voice opposition, well, the USAID-controlled Ministry of Justice will just find a reason to arrest you. It works so well because of the levers of power are easily bought.
Led by former President Igor Dodon, it's openly pro-Russian in its outlook. As things stand, the two parties appear to be running neck and neck.
Are they openly pro-Russian, or are they, as we heard before, are they just friends with everyone? Do they want trade with the EU and trade with Eurasia?
Around a third of the vote each, with polls showing a very slight lead for the BEP.
So you'll see. So this is 12 days ago. The polls were neck and neck with a slight lead for the Populist Party, the right-wing Populist Party.
Led by former President Igor Dodon, it's openly pro-Russian in its outlook. As things stand, the two parties appear to be running neck and neck, with around a third of the vote each, with polls showing a very slight lead for the BEP.
So, the pro-neutrality party, the NATO skeptical party, was winning in the polls 12 days leading up to the election. But then the NATO bot president, the puppet princess president, banned a bunch of the other parties, and then banned the ability to collect votes from Russian-speaking regions. Yeah, sounds fair.
Meanwhile, other smaller players also play an essential part in the process. These include the nominally pro-European Alternative Bloc and the populist R Party, which leans towards Moscow. If PAS loses its majority, as many now believe, these smaller parties could hold the balance of power. Meanwhile, concerns over direct Russian interference in the elections have steadily grown.
This was just one USAID.gov grant program alone. And the concern is Russian interference. They're directly partnering with the incumbent presidency to control every layer of information that Moldovans receive. No mention of that.
As well as claims that Moscow has been paying Moldovans to post anti-government content online.
Oh! Paying them to post anti-government stuff online. What do you think the 110 USAID-funded media outlets in Moldova are being paid by USAID grants to post? Do you think you can find a single, even neutral article from a single one of these 110 programs, media outlets being funded by USAID and USAID Internews? No, you won't find a single one. It'll be the most rabid MSNBC type shit you ever. Being paid to post. Oh, you mean NATO's TikTok influencers? Or USAID's TikTok influencers? But oh my gosh. If they do it, cancel the elections, ban the political parties. If we do it, well, that's just media assistance to build up our democratic institutions in the media sphere to make them resilient to misinformation. Don't you know?
Diaspora communities have also been targeted with offers of trips to Moldova to vote and other inducements to vote for pro-Russian parties.
Every time they say, oh, this is so funny, by the way, what they do, what they say for this. So this is again the Center for Eastern Studies, funded by this Anne Applebaum Poland type. Here, what the allegations are on that. It's really funny. There's this great video. I don't think that we've got time to get into this. I pulled it up, but the allegations are so fucking flimsy and unsubstantiated. It's insane. But I'll put this video in a link below because we do need to get to the main event. But I'll put that down below. All right, let's get to it now. So here is Samantha Power. Actually, let's listen to the rest of this real quick.
So Moldova, a place drowning in willful misinformation. USA launched something called the Media M initiative, where we worked with local media outlets to develop a membership system to increase subscription sales and to improve marketing strategies. And I met with the people who worked at the independent media that were making use, again, of this technical support. And what we've seen is over the past 3 years, this effort, this intentionality has increased the outlet's revenue, who've been, again, aided by this program, increased revenue by 138%. And
so that's not lies, bribes, and interference. 138% increase in funding for 110 media outlets in Moldova. Can you imagine what life would be like if they did this for like our own media? Breitbart could use a little help. The Washington Free Beacon could use a little help. Newsmax could use a little help. But no, we're paying Moldovan media organizations with taxpayer funding from the people who work at Newsmax and Breitbart.
and online reach by an average of 160%.
We increased their online reach by 160%. The enemy is this upstart political party. Oh my God. Okay, all right. All right, so this is these so the same way that these Russian pranksters got a hold of the head of the National Endowment for Democracy, Karl Gershman, back in like 2021, and got him to confess about Ned's CIA work in Belarus.
And we have 4 institutes, and I think all of them are active in Belarus. 2 of them, I think, you know well, because they work very, very closely with you and your team and the Coordination Council, and that's NDI and IRI, our 2 party institutes. And they're under the NED umbrella, and we fund their work, that works on strengthening parties and their messaging, their public outreach, their communications.
Just directly funding. And again, this is the female Chikauskaya, another one of these aspiring, just like the Moldovan young female president. Ned and the CIA backed one of these young female, feminist type characters in Belarus. That one failed. But they're directly working with the political party, funding them, giving them free media, giving them training and assistance. Foreign malign interference much?
And I know that they're working with you and your team very, very closely. And we also have a business institute that's associated with our Chamber of Commerce in the United States, the Center for International Private Enterprise, that we have funded to work with the private sector in Belarus to set a vision and a framework for a post-Lukashenko private economic recovery.
Private economic recovery. We're going to privatize all of your assets. The same thing in the Red Lines memo. Anything to stop the IMF privatization process. Microsoft's got to buy up all your assets. The Soros Management Fund, it gets to buy up all your assets. Remember the when we did the U.S. Institute of Peace streams? The woman you meet at the end of your CIA-backed coup, who tells you what you're allowed to do with your economy now and which private equity and hedge fund firms you need to turn over all of your state-held assets to?
Of the country. And we have a labor institute, a trade union institute associated. And in addition to these 4 institutes and our labor institute, which supports the independent unions in Belarus.
Yeah, our AFL-CIO arm of our CIA, which supports your independent unions. Independent. Then if they're independent, why are they funded by the Central Intelligence Agency? Huh? Riddle me that one. If they were funded by the Russian FSB, would you call them independent?
We also make grants directly to organizations in Belarus and have done so for a very, very long time. And the critical area here, first of all, is free media. We support the journalists. We're aware of the raid on. The
critical area is free media. Yeah. Well, they're not really free if they're on your payroll, are they, CIA?
We support the journalists. We're aware of the raid on the offices, several days ago. Of the
Like the FBI wouldn't raid journalists here in the U.S. if they were seen as secretly on the payroll of Russian intelligence. They fucking did that. Who was the whistleblower? Scott Ritter, right? Scott Ritter FBI raid. FBI raids home of ex-UN weapons inspector Scott Ritter because they over the Foreign Agent Registration Act, because of his journalism. They said FBI searches homes of 2 Americans with ties to Russian state media. You cannot get the list of the media outlets that Ned funds because they're all under blanket state secrecy. They say if we have to tell you the names of the individuals that we fund in Belarus for our media work, that puts their lives at risk. They could be raided by counterintelligence. But you're an NGO. You're not an intelligence agency, even though you were created by the CIA in 1983 and the CIA gets a copy of every one of your grants. But you're just an NGO, aren't you, Ned? But oh my God, they raided the journalists when they found out they got Ned funding. What an authoritarian country! What authoritarian country would do something like that? A crackdown on free and independent media.
Belarus Association. We support people if they have to flee the country. We support their...
And this is how you get all these immigrant and refugee programs. This is part of the bundle of bennies. The bundle of benefits. If you sign up with our little CIA influence nodes, if you get in trouble with the law, if USAID doesn't completely control their justice system, we'll get you out of the country. And you live in a luxury hotel in New York City.
The temporary stay in other countries and all the needs that they have.
Yeah, we'll take care of your Medicare, your housing. We'll give you food stamps. We'll also give you a cash debit card. We'll take care of all of your needs. Just help us with the CIA-backed coup in your country, and you can take advantage of taxpayers in our country.
We have been working around the country in the eastern part of the country, in Vitebsk, in Gomel, and other parts of the east on civic participation, and we've made grants to groups. We also
to get out the vote for our candidate
have worked in the western part of the country on free media in Grodno.
It ain't free. It's paid for by our tax dollars and administered by the Central fucking Intelligence Agency by way of Ned.
Where we've supported citizen journalism.
Okay. Anyway, so these pranksters did it again. This time, they got Samantha Power. So let's now listen to this.
Hello, it's you, the ambassador. I'm glad to hear you. Glad to see you. How are you there?
The situation I know is unimaginably bad, and the unpredictability from Washington. It was bad enough to fight when you knew that, you had all these friends in your corner, but to fight and not know from one day to the next what's coming what support is coming is very challenging.
When you can't rely on your next USAID paycheck, how frustrating it must be.
Sorry about that.
Yeah, especially with a new administration. Of course, you played a huge role for our country, and of course would like to ask you what maybe you have some good news for Ukraine and in this period.
So I think she believes that they are a Ukrainian civil society organization, I believe.
Maybe you know more than I do.
Well, Mr. President, as you may know...
Wait. Does she think that's... Hold on. Amidst millions spent in Moldova. Tens of millions of dollars in to strengthen the administration of the puppet president in Moldova, Maya Sandu. Okay, but what president does she think this is? She doesn't think that's Zelensky, does she? Oh, so she thought it was Poroshenko. So Poroshenko, so after Victoria Nuland and Jeff Pyatt installed Yatsenyuk, then it was Poroshenko as president of Ukraine, then it was Zelensky. So she thinks it was Poroshenko. This shit is gold, man. Holy God. Damn. Oh, this is gonna be good. Okay.
No, because I think we were in touch briefly when I was part of the Biden administration. You're remembering our times together, where you were such a great partner when I was in the Obama administration, and
you were such a great partner, Poroshenko.
Well, Mr. President, as you may know, because I think we were in touch briefly when I was part of the Biden administration. You're remembering our times together, where you were such a great partner when I was in the Obama administration, and we were having all kinds of debates within the cabinet. I was a member of his cabinet about whether to provide lethal weapons to Ukraine, whether that would provoke Putin. This was, as you know, years before the full-scale invasion, but after the invasion of Crimea and eastern Ukraine. And so you saw my
There was no invasion of Crimea. They voted in a democratic referendum.
Public face, but then we had this internal churn.
You saw my public face, but we had this internal churn with Susan Rice.
With Susan Rice and John Kerry and all the rest, and Joe Biden, of course, being a great advocate for being more forward-leaning. And those were very difficult days, and you're kind to remember. You know, those were days where, as you were the one, I think, who educated me that UN Security Council sessions were on, like, at the dinner table. You know, I would say even more satisfying for me, even though you and I didn't get to work together directly, is the Biden years where I ran USAID. So on top of what gets all the headlines, the question of what weapons are going to go to Ukraine now under Trump, on top of the question of what intelligence is going to go to Trump, to me, one of the big untold...
So Ukraine is going to withhold intelligence from Trump while taking our money and weapons?
Stories is no direct budget support, no energy support, no agricultural support. You know, these things that are a critical part of, you can't, Putin can win the war once and for all without firing a shot if the economy collapses.
Which is why we sent $15 billion in USAID funding. Fuck our economy, right? Fuck the people who live in Appalachia. Fuck the people who live in Chicago. What happens to the agriculture farmers in a country 9,000 miles away, 11,000 miles away?
If all the people who came back to Ukraine have to leave again because there's no electricity to keep their kids in school.
We'll pay for their electricity, we'll pay for their health care, we'll pay for their pensions, we'll pay for their agriculture crops, we'll pay for their energy. Yeah, we don't have any problems here. Let's take our tax dollars to fund them there.
I have to tell you, I have no taste of what you do. Our Ukrainian staff, who are the ones who kept everything going and are the ones who had, they funded DIA, the creation of DIA.
The DIA app, the spy state in a smartphone. You guys remember how many times we talked about the DIA app? This was the USAID funded digital ID system in Ukraine, partnered with, Visa or Amex, so that the Joe Biden credit card companies, the ones who funded his career, get a cut of every financial transaction in Ukraine. And they link their social media to their biomedical records, to their digital government ID, so that they can identify anyone who's a threat to Zelensky on the inside.
And the Ministry of Digital Transformation back...
And Google was partnered with them, so Google got 40 million new customers with their IT backbone.
When it was first created, I think in 2019. So I can't say that that's a good news. That's giving you good news. So you all inspire us but we're moving in a more corrupt direction, not a less corrupt direction here.
Yeah, yeah. It wasn't corrupt to send $15 billion to, what did she call?
Has given USAID.
Here's USAID at the DIA in DC conference, bragging about sending $15 billion of cash to the famously corrupt Ukrainian government. Things are moving in a corrupt direction. I sent you $15 billion to your famously corrupt government.
One of the things that Congress has given USAID since this full-scale invasion began is an unprecedented.
All right, can you guys see me and hear me now? Okay, so let's hear that again. She goes,
I can't say that that's a good news. That's giving you good news. So,
So she's talking about the DIA app.
I have no taste of what you do. Our Ukrainian staff, who were the ones who kept everything going, and are the ones who had, they funded DIA, the creation of DIA, and the Ministry of Digital Transformation back when it was first created, I think in 2019. So I can't say that that's a good news. That's giving you good news. So you all inspire us, but we're moving in a more corrupt direction.
So let's see what she said at the DIA launch. At the DIA app, the digital ID, state in a smartphone, crush all dissident thinkers within Ukraine. Here's what she actually said at that DIA launch conference.
One of the things that Congress has given USAID since this full-scale invasion began is an unprecedented amount of money in direct budget support, which sounds kind of obvious. Of course, we would do that. We want to stand with Ukraine, but it's totally unprecedented, this kind of scale of investment. And we're talking along the lines of about $15 billion in a sense, cash to the Ukrainian government, which was famously corrupt.
So, $15 billion to the famously corrupt government of Ukraine. This is what she says at the DIA launch, the USAID State in a Smartphone Digital ID System launch in Ukraine. And then 2 years later, she says, actually, not giving you guys $15 billion is corrupt. We should give $15 billion to your famously corrupt government, but if we cut off any of that money, that's what real corruption is.
Inspire us, but we're moving in a more corrupt direction, not a less corrupt direction here in the United States, unfortunately.
No, I'm afraid that Putin could negotiate any corrupt deal. Maybe someone who could, some sponsor who could change USAID on another NGO.
Yeah, well, what USAID, as you know, was part of the U.S. government. I think the Europeans have tried to step up, but much more on the military side than on the civilian side.
This is exactly what I've been talking about. USAID is setting up these societal resilience funds and trying to get Gates and Soros and Omidyar and Craig Newmark and all the billionaire oligarchs to step up and provide offset funding for USAID.
I would find it very beneficial for someone, because, it's so weird, Mr. President, it's like you call me ambassador, I don't even have access to information right now because they took down the USAID website. I went in advance of this call, I went on the U.S. Embassy's website in Ukraine to see if I could learn, what is going on, what isn't. They've completely taken away transparency.
Are you fucking kidding me? You're the one who took away transparency. All the U.S. By the way, you can just go to the Wayback Machine. Have you read about the internet, Samantha Power? You can literally go on archive.org for any USAID website, and if I go to USAID.gov, right, and it'll say, okay, because we shut your shit down, that's not getting rid of transparency. What's getting rid of transparency is what you did. You covered up every fucking grant, hid it from the White House for 7 months. Told Congress, The White House, every oversight body that you can't see are grantees. You can't see our grant programs. All you get is what's on the website. So if you want to see what's on the website, you can go to the last time you were in fucking office. We'll just go to November 3rd. And you can get it right here. We literally kept the entire transparency that you had. Yanking your fucking security clearance because you're a fucking snake who would weaponize national security secrets for your own fucking personal profit. Like, how is it, by the way, that your net worth skyrocketed to like $30 million on a $180K salary as the USAID administrator?
Thank you so much, Kathy.
Net worth increased by $23.3 million to $30 million in 3 years as USAID chief. Went from $6.7 million to $30 million during the 3 years she ran USAID on a salary of $180,000. Is this insider trading on national security secrets, a la what George Soros and Larry Fink and Tom Donilon do? I don't know. Doesn't look good.
I kind of need people, I'm sure this is your frustration, out of power as well. Like, I'm used to having, 15,000 people work for me at USAID, but just people to turn this in.
I'm used to having 15,000 people work for me. Look at that flex. Look at that flex. I'm used to having 15,000 people work for me. And me knowing everything because I'm actually the CIA's main front-end funnel. So everything state is doing, everything CIA is doing. I got the first ever seat on the National Security Council from USAID.
To bite-sized proposals on the civilian side, whether on ag or on energy or on supporting a lot of the independent media or the anti-corruption NGOs, like,
or our puppet media organizations or our puppet prosecutors.
Like, a lot of that support came from USAID. Again, Europe is picking up some of it, but a lot of those groups are going to go out of business, no question.
I am happy to have been of service. If I'm remembered for nothing else in this life, it's for that last sentence.
Came from USAID. Again, Europe is picking up some of it, but a lot of those groups are going to go out of business.
You picked a bad business to be in, babe.
No question. So I think that's a piece of it.
I could end it right there and have a fabulous night. I can end it right there and I can go out dancing. I almost don't want to continue this. We could end on this note, and this will be a beautiful night in New York City. All your little corrupt little roots of this big blobby tree, going out of business. Boys, we did it. Can you believe 1 year ago how impossible this whole thing seemed to take on? And in 1 year's time, we have the USAID administrator saying, yes, some of it is going to be saved by our allies in the transatlantic side of the blob, but most of these are going to go out of business. Damn. We fucking hit this so hard. This is 10 years in the making, guys. 9 years. 10 years. In the first 7 years, there was fucking no traction on this at all. Nobody wanted to hear it. Nobody understood it. The people who understood it thought it was too big to take on. The people who thought, okay, maybe there's something that can be done, only wanted to toe into it. And then we started this chain fucking reaction. And now it's everywhere. And now the head of the snake herself saying they're going out of business. And again, NATO is picking up. This is the problem. Is like Trump is funding NATO more than ever. And NATO, like you heard her say, right? Well, they're mostly picking up the funding on the military side rather than the civilian side. And like, I don't even know that Samantha Power actually even understands. Like, because a lot of this stuff is handled by lieutenants, a lot of the technical stuff, but a lot of that military stuff is going to go straight to civilian through what's called civil affairs, NATO civil affairs. And so there's this battle is never going to be over, but we're in, like, God, the industry. You know, I always say the operative word in censorship industrial complex is industrial, because what makes this whole thing run is the business. NGOs are a business. Nonprofits are a business. Media organizations are a business. Ain't nobody doing it for free. Well, except I kind of was for the first 6 years of this. But you don't scale. You don't scale when you're doing it as an amateur, not making any money. The thing that makes it operational, to create a complex, it needs to bring in money to sustain itself. And so many of these little blob spawns, NGOs, are going out of business. But they're nonprofits. They're not supposed to make money. The nonprofits are the biggest business on earth.
But I think if you still have context also on Capitol Hill, I think, you know, people should know that the same people who are advocating for continuing military and intelligence support should be advocating for the restart of civilian support.
The problem is they are. Like, the problem is, again, it's the civil affairs. It's this fucking civil affairs stuff. Like, that NATO money is funding civil affairs, and it's going to hit the civilian layer. And, like, I think she's just not up on that. Because she's like so enmeshed in the civilian side. And it's going to be like the USAID Pentagon Coordination Council people who are like aware of the civil affairs folks. And this is like one of these big self-owns that I think the Trump admin just doesn't get yet. Because I think this is what's keeping a lot of the like Ukraine opposition to Trump foreign policy afloat, is the fact that Trump funds NATO, and then NATO civil affairs sends that money to Zelenskyites in Ukraine and keeps them going. Because the money will just get siphoned from the military side to the civil affairs side. And I think that the White House has like no eyes on that, and because it's a really technical booking, almost money laundering pass-through thing, they think, okay, well, we're funding NATO. They don't realize where it goes from NATO. We got to end that shit.
One of the last things I did as administrator is extended a very large loan, interest-free loan, to the government of Ukraine.
Interest-free. No repayment need. This is like when they did, what was it? It's like, well, we're not going to give Ukraine $65 billion in this. We're going to make it a no interest, no repayment date, forgivable loan. This is why all money laundering works through these debt instruments. Because instead of calling it a grant, and then you need to like prove to the IRS like what services were provided, you just make it a business transaction as a loan. But then you structure the loan in a way that it never has to be repaid. There's no maturity date. Things can be postponed contractually and forgiven. 25 from BM Jr. Thanks again for exposing this POS. Pleasure's all mine, man.
Ukraine using the frozen assets as collateral. You remember all the debates about how to use the frozen assets. for a whole set of complicated legal reasons that you know better than me, we were not able to just take the assets and give them, and for you to just spend the assets. But I thought it was quite creative of the lawyers to let us use the assets to spit off interest that in turn became kind of loan payments.
It was creative of the lawyers for us to find ways to launder money to you. Holy shit! There's USAID for you. There's just like another golden buried nugget of USAID fuckery. It was very creative of our lawyers to find a way to launder money to you through something that we were legally not allowed to do, but we were able to skim money off of the top of frozen assets we weren't allowed to freeze in order to send to you, to your, quote, famously corrupt government.
If I understand it. So that's an infusion of money that will continue, even though the spigot of about $1 billion a month that we were USAID was providing with
$1 billion a month in just free money. Like, imagine we could have a golden city. Imagine what Washington, D.C. would look like if we just spent $1 billion a month making it beautiful. And think about how, that would bring in tourism dollars. That would bring in economic development money. But no, our international development is funding the fucking, in our own words of our USAID administrator, $1 billion a month to your famously corrupt government.
With our Treasury Department, that is no longer happening. We were doing that through the World Bank just as a way of
Confessions of an Economic Hitman. Yeah, we were laundering it through the World fucking Bank.
Having safeguards. So, I think there are donors out there. There are foundations. There are other governments.
She's saying guys, you remember, 8 months ago now, when I hopped on stream right after the USAID shutdown announcement, and I went over all the ways they're going to try to get around this by going to other governments, by having the other big donors step up. She's saying in an exasperated way everything that I called day one.
There are individuals who are heartbroken, but there's not a lot of, reliable information about specifically what $1 million would fund, And I think that...
Babe, there's not a lot of reliable information to us either, because you fucking cloaked everything under secrecy at USAID. Go to usaspending.gov and try to find the list of all the individuals.
I've been so demoralized by everything that's happened. I've not been my normal, energetic self out there. Trying to track some of this stuff down. And again, I'm used to having teams of people who provide...
You know what's so funny? You know what's so fucking funny about this? Here's what's so fucking funny. She's bitching about the total lack of transparency around USAID because now she's a fucking outsider like us. And she has to try to cull information about what the fucking organization is doing just like us. Now that she's not on the inside and doesn't have 15,000 fucking people working for her and a seat of the fucking National Security Council and a daily update report from the goddamn CIA, and she has to get USAID information off the goddamn website like we do, now she's complaining about USAID transparency. Because now she's got the same goddamn level of transparency she gave us.
This information is a matter of course, but we're going to have to get a little bit, get our hands dirty in a sense.
What was
Yeah, well, you know a thing or two about that, don't you?
the real role of USAID in Revolution of Dignity?
There's so many answers to this.
This is the Maidan Revolution, the Maidan Square. This is the, remember, I think it was BBC who had the best violent protesters Maidan Square Revolution. They renamed this to the Revolution of Dignity because if you had to look at how undignified it was for USAID to bus in protesters to set the Parliament building on fucking fire. This is all USAID funded. So she thinks she's talking to her her little ally, former president of Ukraine, Poroshenko. And he's asking, well, what was the real role of this? Because, they spent billions of dollars funding these riots to overthrow the democratically elected government. And what she said, well, there's so many answers to this. We did so much. We did everything. We funded the social media influencers. We funded the riot buses, as Jeffrey Sachs confessed, that he was toured around the Maidan Square in the days after it, and he was told everything that USAID did. We funded the unions. We funded the media. We funded the judges and prosecutors. We funded the police and military. There's so many answers to this.
The role of USAID in Revolution of Dignity.
I mean, there's so many answers to this. We've been there since independence. I say we. USAID has been there since independence.
The 1990s.
There are so many answers to your question. I mean, for example, helping fund the creation of DIA and the Ministry of Digital Transformation. DIA is a huge. It's not solving the corruption problem, but it's a huge answer.
Yeah, DIA.
Right, to taking out the middlemen and to creating greater transparency. That was the U.S. and British governments funded that.
Your digital ID system, so if you tweet that you don't like Zelensky or think we should have peace with Russia, you get thrown in jail. That was the U.S. and British governments that funded that.
DFID and USAID funded that. But Fedorov certainly knows all of those facts from being there from the beginning. Prozoro, you remember Prozoro on procurement in the health domain, which is so cut down on corruption. USAID funded Prozoro.
What's Prozoro? A public electronic procurement system. Okay, so this is their whole supply system for their business sector. So that means like making sure that you can only buy from NATO donor drafter class companies, all services. You can only buy from like Burisma. Great.
So that meant hiring out, I don't know if it was an organization or a set of consultants to embed, but they built that whole system.
Back to our consultants.
Even though the war kind of stopped it a little bit, the what's it called? The Hoverla. Hoverla, is that right? The decentralization.
Yes.
Yeah.
However.
That was funded by. I mean, not the. Of course, the spending in the regions or in the decentralized governing structure.
Okay, what's Hoverla? USAID Hoverla. USAID governance and local accountability. So you're accountable to USAID. Supporting local governance institutions. So it's like basically how they control all like the cities. This is how they'll control all the little local mayors and everything. It's structured as a hub and spoke approach. Okay, so it's just controlling giant networks with a project office in Kyiv, 7 regional offices, 11 oblasts, 103 municipalities. This is to make sure that no city gets outside of their control. If any city starts developing as like a hub to promote peace with Russia or cheap gas from Russia, they can just shut down those networks at the city level. Humanitarian assistance from USAID.
But the whole idea of how to do it, the people who went and developed that plan, and then of course the implementation was on all of you. Again, all of those officials that separated the national government from the community. And then, so much independent media. I mean,
what happens if you get rid of the word independent there? Like, think of, like, they have to do this Orwellian thing where foreign government-funded media has to be called independent media. Like, if they just said media, so much of your media is controlled by us. So much of your media is funded and financed by us. 90% of media in Ukraine funded by USAID, including the Kiev Independent. Very independent. It's dependent on USAID funding. It's dependent on Samantha Power for everything it does.
And not just independent media. I mean, even Ukrainian national television.
Fuck, there's no bottom. There's no bottom. Every fucking character in the Truman Show, the fucking baristas on USAID payroll.
But so many of the independent journalists who have exposed corruption include.
And it's so funny because, again, getting back to the Red Lines memo, where USAID threatened Zelensky that he's not allowed to allow any Russian-affiliated TV channels in Ukraine. Well, the Ukrainian national broadcasting TV stations are funded by USAID, while USAID installs a ban in the country on any other foreign government having a TV presence.
Including, by the way, ironically, USAID might have funded them years ago to get training and learn how to do fact-checking or learn how to make money as a journalist, and then
we fund them so that they can fund themselves. We fund their marketing, we fund their promotions, their subscriptions, their memberships. Those eyes, dude. Oh, man. I wonder if they were bright green. It's like the light is... She probably was pretty. She probably had bright green eyes.
then these same journalists were the ones, when we started giving this big assistance after the full-scale invasion, those journalists were the ones that uncovered corruption on the use of U.S. taxpayer dollars. Names of the leading anti-corruption non-governmental advocates.
Wow, that's crazy. The ones that we funded big amounts of money to found corruption from our political enemies. That's crazy. Our hit pieces for hire, our media contract killers, found a way for our prosecutors to kill our political enemies. Wow! It's exactly what we paid them to do. That's crazy. What if we don't fund Moldova? All right, let's see what this link is. Possible effects of refusal of foreign aid for the Republic of Moldova. If they refuse our U.S. aid, then don't worry. We'll structure it through the World Bank. When was this written? 2019? This is one of the reasons. You heard that reference where she said we structured it through the World Bank, the USAID payments? This is because these countries are in debt. We actually make accepting USAID payments a condition of World Bank tranches, like loan tranches. It's sick, okay? Because remember when USAID shut down and like a dozen worldwide leaders came out and said, thank God? Like the president of Mexico, Claudia Sheinbaum, and said, we agree, thank God USAID is shut down. The president of El Salvador came out and said, thank God USAID is shut down. There were like 3 presidents in Africa who said, thank God USAID is shut down. The countries often don't even want the USAID because they know that it's going to fund their political opponents or it's going to fund fucked up shit in the country they don't want. It's not going to the people. But they are forced to take the USAID. The subgroups within their countries are forced against the government's wishes to get the foreign money from USAID because they attach it to World Bank loans. If you don't want your country to go into insolvency because we call your debt, then you have to take this money for your media opponents. You have to take this money for your union opponents. You have to take this money for the judges who will prosecute you if you don't go through with a privatization that the IMF is demanding. Like, do you get how sick that is? And you even heard her say, oh, we structured it through the World Bank. Possible effects of refusal for foreign aid. Yeah, and here you go. World Bank. IMF and World Bank. If they don't want their country's institutions co-opted by us through a direct USAID grant, we'll force the money down their throat. to go to our little influence hubs through the IMF and World Bank. How many times does it say World Bank in here, I wonder? World Bank, World Bank. World Bank in loans. Hard loans, soft loans. IMF, World Bank. World Bank. World Bank. World Bank. World Bank.
You know, all of that, all of those organizations, you know, if I had to guess, probably 50% of their budgets in the early years especially were coming from USAID. And then
we could have such a beautiful country, guys. Like, imagine, like, Portland could be beautiful. If we gave $1 billion a month for police, for riverfront property development, for beautiful buildings, for AI accelerators, for a Central Park type project. How about a Grand Dam? Look at what China is doing. Look at what you can do for $1 billion a month. That's a restaurant. Let me get my mug out of the way here. We could have high-speed rail. We could have great works. We have not done a great work in this country since the fucking Hoover Dam. Can anyone name a great works project in this country since the fucking Hoover Dam? And it'll pay for itself as a tourism thing. People will want to come and see America because it's beautiful. Instead, we have to pay 50% of the entire operating budget of the entire Ukrainian media sector, the entire Moldovan media sector, their agriculture sector, their energy sector. Why? So that fucking Soros Inc. can buy up the properties on the cheap? So that BlackRock can fucking have its portfolio companies buy up property in Moldova and Lviv?
then what was great about USAID is we would go to the Europeans and say, okay, we're doing this now, can you chip in? You know, we already had like proof of concept, you know, that some of these investments were working, that they were paying dividends, that there were good organizations to fund. Whereas if you think back, as you know, to the early 90s, like those organizations didn't even exist, you know, and you're talking.
And they will no more. Going out of business. You started a bad business, like a fucking mafia organization.
About building checks and balances from scratch. And on that score, also, like, you know, even little things. I mean, and, you know, again, I don't know your politics well. I never knew it well, but I certainly don't know it well now. But, you know, work that USAID would do, small things like funding collaborations between Ukrainian parliamentarians, not of a particular party, but let's say...
Of course of a political party. You fucking know it.
Parliamentarians under 35 or female parliamentarians, you know. But, you know, that kind of...
Like the female president of Moldova, like the female attempted president of Belarus that you backed?
Training, the exposure, you know, if we funded them to travel, let's say to Washington or to Paris or to Canberra or something, you know, that kind of exposure that they would get, making them better stewards of Ukrainian taxpayer dollars.
So, American taxpayer dollars funding politicians earlier in their career, before they're 35, so that they can be better stewards of Ukrainian taxpayer dollars. Can't Ukrainian taxpayer dollars do that? Why do American taxpayer dollars need to pay for Ukrainians to be better stewards of Ukrainian taxpayer dollars? Unless you have a fucking agenda you're pushing, which you always are in every country, that you're funding their careers. So their whole careers, they're doing favors for USAID because USAID is doing favors for them.
And so forth. So again, the effort to strengthen checks and balances was across a lot of different.
Yeah, USAID checks and balances on a foreign country's internal political system. I mean, even think about that phrase. What the fuck is a foreign country, the United States, doing installing checks and balances in a foreign country? What if Russia was doing that? What if Russia had checks and balances over the Ukrainian government? Oh, Russian interference on the sovereignty, the precious, fragile sovereignty of the Ukrainian democracy. Russia's control over the checks and balances. Because they have rule of law programs of the Russian Ministry of International Development over their court systems. Because they are funding their female parliamentarians and their parliamentarians under 35. So even if the president wants to do something, if they if the president crosses a red line, we've got checks and balances, baby. We're going to check your ass out of balance.
How do you feel the real role of USAID? So, if I'm not wrong, what was amount?
He's like breaking character here. I think she's getting suspicious. It's like the second time he's like, what was the real role of USAID? It's like, hey, Petro Poroshenko, former president of Ukraine, my close friend while I was in government, why are you putting it like that? What was the real role of USAID? Like, is she not catching on by now? I feel like she's like, why do you keep asking about the real role of USAID in these events? I would be suspicious as fuck right now.
Sounds about $15 billion for 10 years in my presidency.
Since Ukraine's independence in 1991, the United States has supported Ukrainians as they build democratic skills and institutions, as they promote civic participation and good governance, all of which are preconditions for Ukraine to achieve its European aspirations. We've invested over $5 billion to assist Ukraine in these and other goals that will ensure a secure and prosperous and democratic Ukraine.
Oh, in your presidency. Yeah. Well, I mean,
why would you ask this on a recorded? You gotta be a little smoother than that. But I guess she's smooth-brained enough to fall for it. If someone like, okay, I'd like to believe that if I got prank called like this, and someone was like, well, what was the real role of what you did with the Trump administration around the closure of USAID? I'd be like, you sound like you're wearing a wire. And if they asked me that twice, but what was the real role of what you did? I'd be like, that's weird, friendo. Why would you say it like that? It reminds me of that scene in Half-Baked where they're wearing a wire for the drug bust.
Yeah, snap that. You know, it ain't always good to get high before you have important things to do.
What do we gotta do now?
Well, lucky for us, the cops had our backs.
Hello, boys!
Where's the money?
Right here in my bag. Samson, can I ask you a question?
Go ahead.
Do you know where we can score some cocaine?
You want some candy?
No thanks. But it'd be great if we can get some cocaine.
Because he needs to, they're wearing a wire for the feds, and so they can't have slang words. They need to get him on tape saying it directly. It's like, so what is the real role of USAID in the revolution of dignity and the overthrow of the Democratic elected government? What was the real role of USAID in the 15 million? It's like, can we buy some cocaine?
That's so funny. Those guys are doomed. I can't feel my hands. I can feel it.
What we have here is some Colombian heaven.
Pure cocaine.
Candy make
The real role of it. Well, we funded the DIA app. We funded the Media M program. We funded the decentralization program. We funded the rule of law program. So that was the real role of USAID.
makes you dandy.
This is all the cocaine we get for 10 G's, B?
Yeah. Oh, well, we have other products.
Oh, like more cocaine.
And that is?
Fine China, the blue.
Looks like heroin to me, yo.
Yeah. Yeah, is that heroin? You've got to be the dumbest dealers in the history of the dope game.
Oh, you mean the game that you run, yo?
Just call me Jesse Owens.
Hey, Jesse, can we get some cocaine and get the hell out of here?
Okay.
Can I buy some of your heroin, too?
Okay.
All right. It's been a pleasure doing business with you. Thank you very much for the heroin and the cocaine. Here's your money. All right. Abracadabra.
Yeah, man.
That was the safe word where the feds are supposed to come rushing in. But the feds got high on the heroin and cocaine, so they don't get saved.
Abracadabra, man. Abracadabra, yo. Abracadabra, man.
Abracadabra.
Boy, why do you keep saying that? What?
Why do you keep saying what's the real role of USAID?
Abracadabra?
Yes, abracadabra.
It's the latest slang, man. All the kids are saying it, right?
Hey,
abracadabra, my
What's up,
nigga.
abracadabra, yo?
Slim, take off your shirt.
Samson, I hardly know you.
Ladies,
Abracadabra.
Abracadabra, man. Abracadabra, yo.
Abracadabra! Abra!
you're dead.
That is like what this is. They're like wearing a wire, basically, getting her to confess. Abracadabra. The heroin and the cocaine. So you funded the media organizations. You funded the rule of law programs. You funded the DIA app.
I think again, I'm very careful of saying Ukrainians did it, but I think this, I would emphasize, if I were going back and telling this story.
I'm very careful to say the Ukrainians did it. I'm very careful to say that it wasn't USAID who did it. It was the Ukrainians who did it. But if I'm telling the story honestly, they did it because we fucking bribed them with CIA money through USAID.
I think again, I'm very careful of saying Ukrainians did it, but I think this.
I'm very careful to say that this is candy. This is white chocolate. I'm very careful to say this is not cocaine. This is not cocaine. This is not a fucking foreign malign influence operation with lies, bribes, and interference straight from USAID. I'm very careful to say it's the Ukrainians who just happen to get USAID funding rather than USAID. Since I am the fucking cocaine dealer, I am the USAID administrator.
Ukrainians did it, but I think this, I would emphasize, if I were going back and telling the story, it's building the checks and balances.
It's the USAID funded checks and balances, our NGOs that can just corner any political sector in your entire country who gets out of line if they cross one of the red lines to turn their whole country over to us.
In that time, and then in this time, in wartime, we were giving $1.5 billion every single month. Just,
Damn, she stared straight at the camera. She was like, That shit is pure, 100% Columbia grade white powder. That shit is cocaine, and I dealt that, and I'm the big swinging dick of this block. Do you want me to move closer to the wire? Yeah, we were given $1.5 billion a month to bribe your entire political class, to bribe your unions, your teachers, your judges, your prosecutors, your academics, your think tanks, your NGOs. Yeah. She gets close to the camera. Yeah, I did that shit. That's cocaine.
Just right into the treasury of Ukraine. Just in cash.
Damn.
And then in this time, in wartime, we were giving $1.5 billion every single month just right into the treasury of Ukraine. Just in cash. I mean, that was because of the deficit. Now, that money went in when receipts were provided. You know, we had to, for Congress, of course, we had to build in all of these safeguards, but you know, fund at the end, and Congress at the end hated paying for pensions. It was, you know,
they're paying for their fucking pensions. Our veterans don't even have fucking pensions. People fighting, almost die in wars, living under bridges in San Francisco, and we're paying them in Ukraine for their pensions. 1.5 billion a month. Imagine what 1.5 billion a month could do to clean up San Francisco.
Basically supplementing tax revenue, because tax revenue plummeted as the...
Yeah, tax revenue plummeted because George Soros privatized the entire natural gas economy of Ukraine. So instead of the people of Ukraine getting billions of dollars a month from Russia, they were having to pay out their ass for LNG, and having to pay fucking Halliburton and Burisma and Shell and BP and Exxon and Chevron for fucking liquefied natural gas shipped in from fucking Houston. That's why their fucking economy shrunk.
Economy shrunk. Don't get me wrong. I mean, my argument of Putin can win this war without firing a shot, we persuaded enough Republicans that was true that we got the money.
We persuaded enough Republicans that was true that we got the money. Damn. She's like, yeah, that was cocaine. Here's the heroin too. Am I speaking loud enough for you, federal government? Can you hear me, FBI?
But it took an executive push, and once Trump comes in and is asking for cuts rather than to sustain that kind of investment, then that money went away. But that's as important as, you know, you can invest in NGOs, but fundamentally...
I have my personal
question.
Oh,
why did they cut it off? I want to see the full thing. What was she about to say about NGOs?
Another problem now, what I see, is the next step for Putin is he's trying probably to invade Moldova. This is why I'm really worried about what is going on in this electoral process at this moment. So, because they have pro-Russian region, Transnistria, and this way, if Maya Sandu loses the election...
Maya Sandu, again, is the NATO bot puppet princess president.
So it could lead to another conflict from another corner, from Moldovan corner.
Yeah, actually, that's a good point there, Dr. Kirsch. She means we paid enough Republicans. Yeah, that's right, because the executive branch would have control over USAID. They can just, like, funnel money into, like, Lindsey Graham's wife's NGOs or whatever. Give them enough money to Boeing to make the Nikki Haley board seat worthwhile.
Well, I traveled for that reason many times to Moldova, and we made USAID made unprecedented investments there. This was not a country that USAID had really had much of a presence in, very small. we expanded it massively, both for the sake of Ukraine, but of course also for Moldova.
We expanded our USAID presence in Moldova massively for the sake of Ukraine, okay? So you are a Uber driver here in New York City, and your taxpayer dollars are paying for USAID in Moldova to help USAID in Ukraine, to help Lockheed Martin, Raytheon, the Harvard Endowment, the George Soros Management Fund, by way of USAID funding of the political party in Moldova to shore up support for the puppet president in Ukraine. Holy shit. Len K.I.K. Len 4IK is now monthly supporter. Thank you.
And it was a Democratic bright spot with President Sandu.
A Democratic bright spot with our puppet president there.
A Kennedy School graduate.
A Harvard Kennedy School graduate? Are you fucking kidding me? It's the Harvard connection again. That's how they knew she was vetted. Oh my God. It's just like Justice Barroso, Harvard Kennedy School, the head of the Brazilian Supreme Court, the censorship court, Harvard Kennedy School, Gary Kasparov, Harvard Kennedy School. Every foreign government official or judge or prosecutor, any foreign person associated with Harvard Kennedy School is just straight CIA every time. Holy shit. I just posted this on my X, I just reposted it. Harvard, Sudan, gun running, Kasparov. Remember they ran that whole Sudan gun running thing out of the Harvard Kennedy School? Ajak was a child soldier in Sudan in the 1990s and fled to the U.S. He was at Harvard Kennedy School and eventually returned to Sudan to become a World Bank economist, and then became a prominent political activist following South Sudan's independence. Isn't that just perfect? They have this fucking gun running scheme to buy $7 million worth of guns for the CIA-backed rebel faction in Sudan, organized through Gary fucking Kasparov and a Wall Street investor, run through their Sudanese political activist who was a former World Bank economist affiliated with the Harvard Kennedy School. Harvard Kennedy School fellow Peter Ajak. Yep. Harvard material. Running guns into South Sudan. Yep, just your everyday World Bank economist. Read Confessions of an Economic Hitman. They've been doing this shit through the exact same networks. USAID, Harvard Kennedy School, World Bank, and fucking every country on earth for the past 80 years.
And a real reformer, and she narrowly squeaked by the last time, as you know.
She narrowly squeaked by.
But yeah, I'm very worried about Moldova as well.
Yes, I hope that you already invested some money to fight against Russian.
I would like to have more cocaine.
Be great if we can get some cocaine.
What we have here is some Colombian heaven.
Pure cocaine.
I'd like to know the amount of money you invested in foreign interference in the Moldovan election.
Dandy makes you dandy.
This is all the cocaine we get for 10 G's, B?
Yeah. Oh, well, we have other products.
Oh, like more cocaine. And that is?
Fine China, the balloon.
Looks like heroin to me, yo.
Yeah, is that heroin? You've got to be the dumbest dealers in the history.
Influence.
We surged resources. I can't remember now the numbers, but I mean, the so-called Ukraine supplementals always had tens of millions of dollars also for Moldova.
Tens of millions of dollars to tiny little Moldova, population 2.6 million. Tens of millions of dollars into tiny little Moldova just to ensure their little NATO bot Harvard Kennedy School president stays in power. 2.6 million people as a population, 4 times smaller than New York City, and USAID spending tens of millions of dollars, including in that, as we covered, because it just bears friggin' repeating, 110 media outlets, 54 national news outlets in Moldova, 20 regional media outlets in Moldova, 10 local media outlets in Moldova, and 26 media monitoring NGOs in Moldova. All with grants and sub-grants. Tens of millions of dollars.
And that, sorry for the banging, and that money went much, much further in Moldova than it did in Ukraine because it's such a small country. But all.
And that money went much, much further. We bought much, much more influence in Moldova. Fuck. Damn. And they fucking banned all these political parties because of foreign interference. Well, they're funneling tens of millions of dollars from our foreign interference. $5 from Seek the Others. If you were to guesstimate how wears the Trump cabinet the extent of the Moldova occupation, do you expect it to make progress and ending anytime soon? I think it's complicated because Trump has this philosophy where, you know, he's got to keep the coalition together. In order to get a budget done, he's got to make Lindsey Graham and John Thune and these guys happy. And, you know, to some extent, I think they don't necessarily want to stop the NATO civil affairs pass-through funding in Moldova because it's a hedge against Russia as they see it. So it's complicated.
All of that money was cut off when Trump came to power. Everything, all of those investments.
Yeah. But again, check the NATO civil affairs. This is a NATO story. And USAID is downstream of NATO. And NATO's got the civil affairs funding, and we're funding NATO more than ever right now. So they're just going to take the NATO military funding and just transfer it directly to the civil affairs branch, and then civil affairs will fund the civilian institutions in Moldova. But she's too dumb to know that.
People don't, when they think about Western support, they think about arms, and maybe they think about Toria Nuland and like interference. You know, they don't think about these kind of forms of more subtle support. You know, Ukraine.
Like working. When people think about like corruption and bribery, they think about Victoria Nuland, but I should be getting the credit for corruption and bribery because we do all these subtle things that aren't like as much of a, you know, we don't have fuck the EU, Yatsenyuk will be the next president. Like, we'll just fund the media organizations. We'll fund the private sector businesses, business leader communities. We'll fund the NGOs and think tanks and political leadership, emerging global leaders program fellows. I want the credit. Victoria Nuland isn't the worst woman on earth. I am. It's like what she's saying openly.
Will be the bad guy in Trump's narrative, in Trump's mind, and then all the talk of sanctions and other things will not happen. I am pleased with the sanctions on India around buying the oil, but
yeah, because you led the whole anti-Sikh, anti-Modi thing with USAID. I mean, you're the one who did the fucking Greta Thunberg talking points that we went over. You did the farmers' protests with U.S. Institute of Peace, which we went over in our U.S. Institute of Peace streams.
That's the only good thing Trump has done. I thought that was, you know, that's not something that we ever did in the Biden administration, and so to give credit there, maybe that can deter Modi from buying so much oil.
I think that this is the last chance for Moldova. what Moldova.
I'm very worried. I'm very worried myself. I wish both of us were still in power, in office, and with a chance to do something about it. It's incredibly frustrating to be sounding these alarms and to feel like no one's listening in a relevant place. But Macron and people like that are very important. Van der Leyen's very important.
Oh, but fortunately, we'll have French foreign interference in the Moldovan election. And we'll have EU foreign interference in the Moldovan election. They're like banning political parties for Russian influence, while you have the USAID administrator admitting to tens of millions of dollars of support to one candidate's political apparatus, and bragging openly that, don't worry, we'll have other foreign interference from France and the EU.
I mean, while Trump is on the sidelines for Moldova, Europe becomes much more important. So I hope you'll use those channels with that warning.
I will help you. I hope you will use those channels without warning. What does that mean? Without warning? Like without warning the media that you're doing it? I hope you will use these other foreign interference channels.
Thank you very much, dear Ambassador. Have a great day. And
Samantha,
we will never give up.
Thank you. Never.
And that's a wrap. Wow. Okay, that was a fun one. I thought we were going to do like 2 hours, but that ended up just being such a fun ride. Was that as good for you as it was for me? Only more excitement ahead. It's going to be quite a week.